Hey, how long is a blood sport, by the way? Or you
Okay.
don't know?
Anytime you
Wait.
like. If
Yeah.
you have to
Yeah.
leave,
Yeah. If you have to leave at a certain point, you could leave. What's going on, everyone? We are live now. Welcome back to another Warski Live. People have been waiting for this one. JF and I have been waiting for this
Hey,
one.
how long is a blood sport, by the way?
Oh, whoops,
Or you don't
sorry.
know?
uh,
Sorry, it doesn't think. There we go. Sorry. Yeah. So JF, are you looking forward for this one or what?
I'm doing very good. I'm looking forward to it. Indeed, this is a great week for autism. We have the Ryan Dawson versus Halsey debate, and Trump just named the International Autism Awareness Day for April 2nd. Really, it's a great day. It's a great week for autistic people. I don't care if people don't like it. I'm gonna play my jingle. I'm so happy.
One of these days, and it won't be long.
Come on, Jay. Take a round of what is white.
Beautiful. And I just want to say, I did just have I'll just address this real quick. Had a Twitter spat with Blair White. She unfollowed me. I don't care if you're gonna unfollow me. That's completely fine. But if you're my friend, or I think we're friends, and cool, at least a DM to be like, hey, I have a problem with you. I actually got a few DMs from people who said that they had to unfollow me because they didn't like what I was doing or where I was going. So I thought I would just get a little bit more respect. But I did go off the handle and call her a piece of human garbage. Probably not. I'll say right now, I have the flu. Okay, I woke up super fucking sick because Sinead is sick. So I got super sick, and I'm heavily medicated. And here's one thing I've learned, JF: medication plus Twitter, probably a bad idea.
Oh yeah. What medication are we talking about? Are we talking about those DMX cough syrup?
Yeah, like the codeine ones, and the flu ones basically. And then I'm on Twitter and I was on Kumite and I was like, what the fuck, you unfollowed me? You didn't even tell me you unfollowed me, you piece of human garbage. Fuck. And I went off a little bit. But if you want to unfollow me, Blair, totally cool. We DM'd each other after we both deleted our tweets. We don't want any drama. That's all right. That's it. It's simple.
You were emotionally hurt because you really cared about your friendship with Blair White, and it hurts you that she's essentially unfollowing you because of your creative direction currently.
Yeah, and it's again, I've she didn't. I mean, like the reason I'm not as mad anymore is she didn't take the approach that a lot of other people did, where they just start bashing me horrendously and making videos about the style of video I'm making. She just cut me off, which that pissed me off, and I took it. But you know what? I don't give a shit. I understand what I'm doing now is different than what I was doing before, and along the way, I'm gonna lose some people and gain some other people. So that's fine. I'll be mature about this one.
All right, now, and the two contestants of today, we've had a big story with each of them. Ryan was a previous guest on the show. Halsey has come 2 or 3 times, I believe. And last time Halsey was involved in a debate, it was with Mike Enoch, and I was like, this is the first time I see people starting insulting each other in DM. What we had this time is it's the first time people threaten each other with throwing axes in DM.
Yeah, I saw some blood involved.
He's actually brought his throwing axe.
Yeah.
Now,
I think Ryan and Halsey, you can both confirm this. Last night, I just jumped into that group chat and I just wrote LMFAO, like what the and I just see, and then it ends with Halsey being like, "All right, guys, I'll see you all tomorrow," and then Ryan's just like, "I think you truly have a personality disorder." To Halsey. Because Halsey, it wasn't even blood sports. It was legitimately uncomfortability in the group chat. Oh my
now
god!
I've thought
Funny.
about it, and if there's one way I would want to die, if I have to die, it would be through a throwing axe. I think it's pretty hot.
Especially
Yeah.
one,
Imagine I received this axe in the cranium.
especially ones
that
that
a
are
tomahawk?
saga axes that have stars of David on them.
Oh my
Oh, they have stars.
God.
Oh, no, no, no. Thank you.
No, no, put that down. Holy shit. Hang on, maybe show everyone that tomahawk one more time. I had JF featured. Can you? So when you were saying that in the group chat yesterday, you actually did, you have a Star of David on the tomahawk?
Look at the screws. They're screwed in by Stars of David.
Jeez, what kind of screwdriver do you need for that? Like the Star of David driver? I'll take a David.
You need, Andy, what you need is a screwdriver.
Excellent.
All right, so let's start it right now. We've discussed a lot of subjects. There's lots of things to talk about tonight. The initial conflict between you two was with respect to an episode where Halsey has appeared, and Ryan watched that episode, and he says everything that this guy is saying is crap. And then we had Ryan come on the show and tell his version of the story. Essentially, I would like to get first an introductory statement from each of you, starting with Ryan, on the question of Jewish influence on geopolitics internationally, and in particular the role of Israel in military invasions and on American politics, just so we frame the debate and we know what we're talking about. Ryan.
Yeah, and the previous thing that I watched, that applied to Mike Enoch being full of crap as well. And I didn't watch the whole thing. I couldn't get through the whole thing. It was just dumb to me. I don't like calling it Jewish influence when we're talking about Israel, even though there are Jewish Zionists, because Jewishness is a much larger category than Zionism. There are plenty of non-Zionist Jews. To me, that's like saying something like whatever the CIA does is white interest or something, because most of the CIA is white. I don't think you can collectivize like that. But there certainly is a lot of Israeli influence in American policy, and a lot of it actually is hard to separate from the interests of the MIC, the military-industrial complex. And so, how much of it is because of AIPAC, how much of it because they have overlapping business interests is very hard to separate out. But it's undeniable that it has been detrimental to the United States to follow these policies for whatever reason. Whether it's Lockheed Martin or AIPAC or a combination of all the above. And so, in my opinion, I don't think we would be involved in Syria. I don't think we would have had a war in Iraq if not for influence from not only the Israeli lobby, but also Israeli partisans embedded within the Bush administration at the time.
So, Halsey, do you agree with this version of the statement where Ryan is saying the military-industrial complex has misled America? It has cost billions and trillions of dollars, and it is a negative influence on America.
Absolutely not. The military-industrial complex, while it does have its negatives, has basically spawned every piece of technology that you've ever used for pleasure, for work, for anything in the last 100 years. So the internet came from the military. The idea of airplanes came from the military. These are all things that are built when you decide to build a strong military. One could argue that, oh, they would have made them for civilian purposes anyway, but they wouldn't, because the money wasn't there to develop them, and the need wasn't there for the communication to develop them. People don't develop things like the internet because they say, oh, wow, people will be able to talk easier. They do it for defensive reasons. And I do find it interesting that he says, oh, well, without Israel, we wouldn't have had the Iraq War. The prime minister of Israel at the time, Ariel Sharon, tried tooth and nail to convince Bush not to go to war in Iraq. He said there was no purpose. And then when all said and done, he fell in line because Bush told him he needed support. So the war in Syria, I don't really know so much about the war in Syria because there hasn't been a war in Syria. There's been a conflict with American and Russian interests that have been fighting it out in Syria, Iranian interests, Syrian interests. But that was mostly spawned from Obama, who I think everybody would agree is no friend of Israel. But Ryan does make an interesting point where he says, well, no, my problem isn't with the Jews. My problem is with the Zionists. And this is a point where it was funny because me and Mike Enoch even agreed on this one, that what Ryan is against is ethno-nationalism. What Ryan is against is collectivizing people as white or Jewish or anything like that. He talks about Israel as an ethno-state, and then he talks about it as a bad thing. He says, no, it's terrible that they're able to enforce their towns to have this because it's an ethno state, or this because it's an ethno state, which is interesting because 90% of what we've talked about in our previous debates was, I've always said I'm a fan of an ethno state. I just don't want to live in a white ethno state because I don't consider myself white. I've given practical advice to people like Mike Enoch and plenty of other people who vouch for me, that I've said that I think that people collectivizing for their common good is a good thing, even if I disagree with the reason or the why. You know, Ryan has done this quite a bit. I also find it interesting that he's not showing his face. What he's doing is he's showing a picture of a girl who slapped an Israeli soldier and got arrested and got 8 months in prison for slapping a soldier. Now, somehow he's going to justify that slapping a soldier is okay because an Arab Muslim did it, which is your typical SJW response to everything. And that's what Ryan is going to keep doing, you know? So let's just keep going.
I wanted to unpack some of the crap you said. There's a huge difference between having military technology and specifically going to war in Iraq. You don't need to.
I don't think I made that connection in the first place. I didn't make the connection that having military technology was about the war in Iraq. I never said that, and I don't think that you putting words in my mouth is okay for you to
yeah, but Halsey, I was talking about the war in Iraq, and then you just started talking about the military in general, like I'm against the
one
military.
Sentence about the war in Iraq. Don't act like you were teaching professor style to me, like you promised you were going to do, and lend into this great thing about Iraq. You said one sentence. One.
I was talking about the MIC and influence as a question that was asked about, and I talked specifically about Iraq and Syria.
I hear you.
And then you took that into a generality and said, oh, well, you're just anti-military, and military has provided a lot of technology. That's what you did.
It has.
Yes, it has, but that doesn't mean we needed to go to war in Iraq.
I didn't say we needed to go to war in Iraq. Did I in any way intimate that I wanted to go to war in Iraq?
And what's your point? Because we're talking about Iraq, and you're like, well, the military's made technology. Okay, so?
We weren't talking about the war in Iraq. You said a sentence about the war in Iraq. But
so I think that everyone agrees on the fact that military budgets can contribute to innovations. We're talking about the war in Iraq. It seems that you both also agree that we shouldn't have gone to Iraq. Halsey, is that what you're saying?
I'm saying I probably am not coming from the same angle he is, in that if we were going to go to war in Iraq, there's no reason why it should have been fought the way that it was. American military power was enough that we could have done whatever damage we needed to do if we thought that we were going to need to take on Iraq, and it could have been over in a month. But instead, we did a military occupation of Iraq, which was probably one of the stupider moves that the American government has made in years.
Well, they certainly knew what was coming. Dick Cheney, when he was Secretary of Defense, long before we invaded Iraq, stated as much in 1994. The reason why in the first Gulf War Saddam Hussein wasn't taken out was because it would lead to a quagmire, and that you'd see Sunni and Shiite and Kurdish factions fighting with each other, threaten the territorial integrity of Turkey, etc. So they're well aware of the quagmire that was going to be created, and did it anyway. And I think that a lot of that, the reason for the occupation, which I agree was a bad way to go to war and a bad strategy, wasn't because of incompetence or ignorance. It was intentional, and that's part of the influence of the MIC. Not everything is positive with the military. A lot of the things they make, they do for the sake of it because it's profiteering. That is a huge influence, unfortunately, and that does happen. We spent $1.5 trillion on the F-35, and this is a plane that has so many problems. I mean, they've made 3 different versions of it. It doesn't even work. I call it a Bradley fighting vehicle with wings. That was 55 of our casualties in the first Gulf War, was a Bradley fighting vehicle. This is something we spent $11 billion on. It had aluminum walls. It was a hybrid everything that could do nothing. We spent $5 billion, thanks to John Kerry, and largely, on this digital camo that it's like 4 different colors. It couldn't help you with anything, but they just spend money for the sake of it a lot of times. And then they can hide behind the fact that, like, everybody wants to support the military. It's kind of one of those untouchable things, like the environment or health or education. Everybody's pro that. But that allows a lot of corruption, because they can say, oh, well, you're opposing this specific thing, then you don't like the military in general, and you're not supporting the troops, blah, blah, blah. And that is what allows for a lot of military waste. and the U.S. is king in military waste.
Well, I don't disagree with that point, and I don't disagree that the F-35 has not been what it was built up to be by far. When you do science, when you do technology, when you create things, you're going to have failures. There are going to be things that you chase down the rabbit hole that wind up going way over budget and way too far, but they're not going to work. And sometimes finding out something is not going to work is just as important as finding out something is going to work. So you can't embark on any expedition in technology or science with the idea that I will only do this if it's going to work in the end.
Yeah, but that in this specific example is not what happened. This was profiteering. The Bradley fighting example too, that the Bradley fighting vehicle, they know that aluminum walls are not good at stopping bullets, but Alco wanted it that way, and that's how it came. And there were people in the DoD that vehemently opposed this, and they were fudging tests and things. They fudged the tests for the F-35 and the F-22. They just kept making the test easier until they could pass them, because they'd already sunk so much money in. And you got career people that need to save face, etc. And so, yes, I agree that sometimes failure is what you need in science generally, but specifically, which is what we're talking about, that's not the case here. They did it because of profiteering.
So we have a few super chats. Totally Not Troll 25 PLN says Halsey got jealous of Nick the Knife Fuentes nickname, so he had bought an axe. Sad.
Yeah, but
And we have Joshua.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm old enough that I know how to use them. Did you see him cut himself the other day when he pulled out the little pet knife?
No, he didn't. He did.
He cut his hand in the middle of the Tokes debate, and then he said, "Oh shit, I'm bleeding. I cut myself. Knife a little too sharp."
I also
Joshua Larson, $5 US, makes a reference to a recent shooting, and I will not read the super chat. I appreciate the donation though. Arakoda, $5 US. Wrong. We sent $400 billion on the F-35. The overall lifetime cost is over $1 trillion, similar to the F-16. Kool-Aider, $5 US says, right now Andy looks like that girl from Breaking Bad who died from a heroin overdose.
Yeah,
now it is my
I look
That's
awful.
Dawson, not
Maybe
Andy.
one more. Maybe one more. Malcolm from the North threw $10. Thanks, man. And how are you, Malcolm? I love Malcolm. He says, "How long is the blood sports?" By the way, in reference to Halsey, he said, "About 9 inches flaccid, sir."
No, indeed, it's totally my fault. I would have to pause a little bit the debate because there was a subject I wanted to explore with Ryan before we began, and I forgot to ask him. Ryan, what's happening with your social media presence? I heard that there was some bans, and there were some also good news, right?
Yeah, I forgot about that too. So last time I was on, the reason I postponed this is because I thought I could help promote it if I could get unbanned on my sites. And so I was thinking, I don't know whether or not I'm going to get my YouTube back. That would be a big one. But I was supposed to be unbanned on Facebook because they set it for like a certain number of days. And so I was unbanned, but before I had a chance to really do anything, they banned me again because the sensitivity police got upset that 7 years ago I defended Mark Twain.
Okay.
However, and also some more bad news is my regular website is down from malware and whatever nerd talk they explained. Anyway, that's kaput. But I did get my YouTube channel back, sorta. They showed like 80 videos, but
All right.
they're still there. They're just set to private, and I have no ability to change it. But I'm gonna.
Oh,
get
you
that.
cannot put them back public?
No.
Oh, that's very
that
sad.
stinks.
They got mad because I was grilling Sandy hoaxers and saying, "Look, I'm pro Second Amendment, but guys, people did die in these shootings, and that was too much for them, I guess."
Okay. And
But
now,
yeah, the ANC report's down, but I do have my YouTube channel back, and a guy got me on Steam It. I've only made like 2 posts. Apparently, you can. So, guys, if you are trying to get on Steam It and you just waiting, if you have cryptocurrency, you can spend like about $6 and get it immediately.
okay. Now, Halsey mentioned the picture of the girl that you're using as an avatar. Can you tell us the story of this girl?
Ahmed Tamimi, yeah. Her uncle was killed. Her cousins have been killed. At least 10 of her family members have been arrested. They beat the shit out of her brother. He was like 10 years old. He had a broken arm, and they're slamming his face in a rock. And so some kids attacked Israeli soldier. And then after murdering her uncle, some soldiers were in her yard, her private property, and her and I'm not sure if it's a friend or cousin is with her, and they're both sort of kicking and spatting, and soldier spits back, but it's pretty restrained, doesn't do anything, and she slaps him in the face. And she also tried to kick him in the shin. Um, then nothing really happened with that. No one cared. But then about 4 days after, a video of it was leaked, and because that was embarrassing, they came and got her in the middle of the night, and she is in prison now for the next 8 months. That's
So this happened recently?
A few weeks ago.
A couple weeks ago, yeah,
Jesus.
a couple weeks ago.
So, Halsey, do you agree that the Israeli state exists in the violation and in the violence being committed against the Palestinian people?
I didn't understand the question.
Do you agree that the Israeli state exists in violation of the rights and in violence being committed toward the Palestinian people?
Absolutely not. Israel is a state that has a root back in that land 33,500 years. If you look at how the United Nations defines indigenous people, Jews fit every single metric of the indigenous people of that land. And any violence that's brought on by the Arab side is well earned, well deserved, and I'm just sad that they're not willing to kick more ass when it comes to keeping themselves safe.
And Ryan, is that correct that you disagree with this assessment of Israel?
I disagree with the 3,500 claim. It's biblical mythology. Jews have always lived in Palestine, but not as a majority. In the 1800s, they were about 5% Jewish, 15% Christian, the rest Muslim. The Palestinians are also indigenous to the land. Even in the biblical account, they're called the Philistines, which you see the Joshua and all the other things, the mythology of King David killing a giant and so on, fighting with them. Samson from the Bible killing 1,000 Palestinians or Philistines with the jawbone of an ass. Now, I don't think these miracles happened. But you could argue like, well, maybe something like that happened, but not. It's been embellished, whatever, because it's religion. But I don't think you racially inherit land from thousands of year absence, and I don't think you can displace people who are also indigenous. There's no reason why you can't both live on the same piece of dirt. But I don't have a problem with the Israeli state as far as Israeli proper. I mean, after the Holocaust, I think that's why the UN thought, look, we have to do something. Although we did win World War II, so Jews didn't actually have to go anywhere. But many had been there. It's a long, complicated process. Started going there from 1890s, especially the 1930s, and then obviously in the 40s, to escape persecution in Europe. So they needed a homeland or a place to be safe, since at that time they didn't know they were going to win World War II. So they're immigrating in the middle of it. And but that was a bad foresight, because it was not a land for what they say, people without a land or land without a people, but there wasn't a land without people. There were people already there, and they got displaced. Now, Israel being Israel, let's say to the 1967 border, is not going anywhere. They put a lot of labor into that land and built that up, and they should be allowed to live there and have an Israeli state. But I have a huge problem with the settlements in the West Bank, which are racial colonization brought about by violence and home demolitions and that kind of thing. There's no justification for that, and it causes problems for Israel and Palestine to maintain this military occupation and settlements. And they are internationally illegal, and the UN just recently condemned it again with a resolution. I think it was 2334, which the UN routinely condemns Israel, but usually the US, because they have a permanent membership on the Security Council, vetoes everything. And last time they abstained, so the vote was 14-0, because the rest of the world, they know. And they were condemning Israeli settlements. Israeli settlements absolutely exacerbate the problem. It's land annexation, and it's brought about through violence. And this isn't the same as an ethno-state of free voluntary exchange and who you want to live near or what have you. This is just a violent colonial export that just murders and confiscates land through force and protects it with a standing army against civilians. And that is the problem I have with Israel, and the U.S. is subsidizing the entire thing, and I have a problem with that as well.
Halsey, on the question of settlements, it does seem that settlement is not a response of self-defense. It does seem that it is a genetic overriding policy that helps a people gain a majority or gain in numbers within the boundaries of where another people live. What are your thoughts on settlements in Israel?
Number one, I don't have a problem with settlements, obviously. And number two, the issues, I mean, first of all, there was a lot of crap that he just threw in there to kind of give himself some background. When he talks about the Arabs being the relatives of the Philistines, first of all, the same books that talk about the Philistines disappearing. Secondly, I find it funny he mentions the word Philistine because it means invaders in Hebrew. Thirdly, the area was called Palestine when Rome conquered it after a war with the Jews in, I think it was the year 67, and named it Palestina after the Philistines as an insult to the Jews. So it wasn't that the Philistines came before the Palestine area. It was the opposite. It was that Palestine was brought about as an insult because of the Philistines. But the Bible mentions Arabs all over the place. So they obviously were a distinct separate people from the Philistines. Secondly, the idea of Israeli settlements can only be a settlement on occupied land if it was occupied land, which it isn't. The 48 border is an armistice line. That's where the war stopped. After that, there was no Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza. Gaza was ruled by Egypt because that's where their armies stopped. And the West Bank was ruled by Jordan, where their armies stopped. In 1967, when Jordan and Egypt both lost a war, Israel took those lands back. Now, they didn't forcibly expel all the Palestinians from those lands, as they were well in their right to do, but they decided to build settlements there instead.
No. First, no. Yeah. That goes against the Forced Geneva Convention, Article 49, about annexing territory, even if it is conquered in a war. And this is private property. It's not established by whether there's a Palestinian state or not. If people living in a home and you go there with a bulldozer and knock it over and set up a Jewish-only colony, that's just ethnic cleansing. And it's been internationally condemned, and it is recognized as internationally illegal. And if you want to say, well, the UN, who cares? That Israel was created by the UN through the UN mandate in the first place. So the same body, political body, is saying that these settlements are illegal and they break the Fourth Geneva Convention because that's what they're doing. It's ethnic cleansing. They're destroying private property and taking it for, the self-proclaimed chosen race of God, where God's a real estate agent. God is not a real estate agent, and there's no archaeological evidence for the King David and all the rest of it. Jews were living
which is not true.
Palestine with Philistines.
Which is not true.
Not just disappear. It's not like all the Arabs were just purged out of the land, and I mean, that would be conquest as well. It's just ridiculous to say, well, like thousands of years ago, my particular group of people used to live here, even though some of them are still living there. Like they said, they've always had between 3 and 5% population there, and all over the Middle East, all over the world. Jews have lived everywhere, but there's no reason to exclusively grant land to a specific religion or ethnic group. I don't agree with Islamic State. I don't agree with the Jewish state. I don't agree with giving states based on theocracy or land claims. And what's really baffling to me is how a lot of atheist Jews don't believe in God, but they still refer to this God as the real estate, like, oh, well, God gave us this land. This is our promised land. And that kind of religious layer on it makes it extra hard to deal with. I don't think there is a solution because you've got crazies on all sides. There was the Palestinian riots in the 20s where they went around. They didn't attack the Christians, but they attacked the Jews. I think 5 Jews died, 4 Arabs died.
69 in Hebron alone.
I'm talking about 1921 first. There were riots in 21 as well. 5 dead and 4 Arabs, and hundreds of Jews got injured. So it wasn't like out of the blue. And they did this in response to the Balfour Declaration because they felt like, hey, we've been living here continuously for centuries, and suddenly, because they say they were here thousands of years ago, we have all these Europeans migrating down here and buying up land and changing their culture. You see a lot of Europe today is upset with the migrants from the third world that are changing their culture. and bringing in alternative culture, alternative religion, alternative beliefs. And there's going to be a culture clash. And the same thing happened with Palestinians. Now, that doesn't justify violence, but the violence, with Haganah and Palmach, it was birthed in violence. The Jewish terrorist gangs were murdering the British and attacking police stations, blowing up trains and hotels, and threw grenades in windows and murdered Palestinians and raped people and mutilated bodies. Dari Yassin's a famous example. And that was all 5 weeks before the war started in 48, was with the Arab armies, the 5 Arab armies attacking not the Jewish agency, but the Etzel Brigade, and Haganah, Stern, and Irgun had already gone through villages and massacred people, hundreds of people. And then when they showed up, Palestinians were fleeing, of course. And then they lost the war, but again, you don't cede territory in war, according to the Geneva Conventions, and that is what the UN has internationally recognized, and even the US abstained from that vote just recently. And so these settlements are illegal, whether you agree with them. You think you should have ethnic colonies and confiscate private land and run over kids with bulldozers. If that's what you want to be, just ardent racist, that's fine. But it's still internationally illegal.
Well, I do find a couple points that you just made interesting, is that you said you're against a Jewish state, you're against a Muslim state, but you don't seem to be against a Japanese state where you live and 98% of the population is Japanese. You don't seem to have a problem with your own ethno-state, which you live in order to accomplish its goals. You also don't seem to have a problem with American military aid going to Japan, as American military.
Japanese are not bulldozing down homes and confiscating land from
every country does that. It's called eminent domain. If you own a land, you can knock down whatever you want for whatever you want.
Yes, domain, you have to pay for property.
You can
purchase it.
Secondly, nobody is
every country is not bulldozing down houses and creating ethnic states. And Japan is the way it is because it's an island nation and because the language is only on this island, and they have strict immigration policies because they become Chinese overnight if they didn't. But I'm living here. You're allowed to come to Japan. You can move to Japan of any ethnicity as long as you speak Japanese and can get a job. You can immigrate here legally. Yeah, you cannot go to a Jewish settlement unless you're of the correct ethnic religious category.
You can't go to a Jewish settlement unless you're of the correct, what did you say? Religious ethnicity? Ethnic
religious category, a circ.
No, not really, because I've seen Ethiopians there who are black. I've seen Indian who are Chinese. I've seen Sephardi Jews who are of Middle Eastern origin. I've seen European Jews in the settlement. In fact, I've seen lots of different ethnicities.
Yeah, you got to be Jewish. It doesn't matter if you're Sephardic or Ashkenazi or whatever.
Well, those are Israeli citizens. A country can decide what citizens live in its towns. Like Japan, if you're claiming that they don't allow the Palestinians to live in the settlements, they're not citizens.
But like Japan, though, right?
It's their land that was forcibly taken from them to set up a Jewish-only colony.
Yeah,
they can't even
don't lose a war. Don't lose a war, and you don't have anything to worry about it.
No, that's not true. When you lose a war, you don't cede territory.
Oh, you don't? Oh, okay.
No.
Okay.
That's what it was internationally agreed upon in Geneva. That's what I've said like 6 times now.
No, you constantly reference the UN, and every time you do, it's so cringe. I don't even know what to do.
The UN created Israel, so you can't have it both ways.
No, a war created Israel. The UN said that we will agree to the establishment of a Jewish state. They made a Swiss cheese little area where they would allow Jews to live in between 3 swaths of Arabs, and then 5 armies invade. They won it at the tip of a gun. Don't believe for 1 second that the UN granted it
white papers of 39 are the one that had this.
The one that gave them Jordan as well, and then halfway through it, they decided to take half of Jordan back from the Jewish homeland and give it to the Arabs. Wait, not even the Arabs. They gave it to Hashemites. Hashemites didn't live in Jordan. They were from Saudi Arabia. They were imported to be trained by the British to take over Jordan and have half of the mandated Jewish home given to them. But I don't hear you bitching about that. I don't hear you bitching about them deciding to give that to the Hashemites, who are invaders. They're not native to there, and they still control it to this day. As a matter of fact, they have a nice long history of butchering Palestinian Arabs all over the place, hence why Black September was created. So I love your selective outrage and your selective knowledge of how benevolent the UN is when it agrees with you, but how they just can be ignored whenever it doesn't.
So Ryan, on the I don't know, someone muted Ryan?
Nope.
I think you'll need to unmute yourself, Ryan, so we can hear you on the question of, do you have a double standard there? We're not hearing you. I think we lost your microphone.
He's muted right now. I don't know if it's. Maybe he's frozen.
Yeah. Hey Ryan, if you want to fix, I thought unmute for a second, Ryan.
Hello, Ryan.
Here, I'll just read just a few super chats.
Yeah,
here.
let's read some super chats.
Well, no, you know what? I can address one thing, and he can address it when I get back.
Wait, hang on. Hey, hold your thought. Let me just pound through a couple super chats, just because people have been donating. I wanna Salt Wota, $20. Ryan, I love you, but can you turn up the energy? Take off that avatar, put on your camera, sit up straight, and get into this debate already. So he's just calling you out. Gabriel Lopez threw $10 to say I'm foreign. Can anyone help me with understand what a fat boomer K word means?
I can actually explain. You know, I only recently learned what a kike is.
I'll say kike.
And honestly, and funny, I don't care. None of this offends me.
Okay,
but
cool.
it was one of those things. Someone asked me when I was on Alt Hype stream, what is a kike? And I honestly just never thought about it. That I had no idea. So I looked it up, and it was when the immigrants from Europe came to Ellis Island. They were asked to draw an X for their name, and they all spoke Yiddish. Yeah. And they were afraid that that X symbolized a cross, that they were trying to say, you're Christian, right? So they didn't. They drew a circle, which in Yiddish is a keikel.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Actually,
I heard that on Opie and Anthony back in the day. And Patrice,
I haven't listened. I miss Opie and Anthony with a fury. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, Patrice O'Neill actually said that story about how the word kike was invented. And then Louis C.K. chimes in with, hey, you know how the word nigger was invented? He's like, there was some guy, and he was just being a nigger, and someone's like, stop being a nigger, you nigger.
You know what? I spent a whole year not knowing what kike meant, and I thought it meant lesbian.
Oh, well, now you know what nigger meant too. It was just a feeling. It wasn't. It was just there. The more you know, everyone's saying. In the chat, yeah, fucking Ryan just jumped in like, wait, what do they talk about?
Yeah, right.
So we were commenting on some super chats. Were there some more to read before we go back?
I'll pound through a bit. Glass half empty, $2. Europeans. Laser Razzle, $5. Even with the weak tone and quiet voice, I am far more convinced by Ryan so far. So much for Blood Sports. And then he throws another $5 to say, even with the you repeated that. Thank you very much for the $10. Glass half empty, $5. Dawson is lying about Japan so hard. Wit pig go home. I can't even read that. Sorry about that. Glass half empty. Simon Scola, $5. Japan doesn't steal land that isn't theirs or use white phosphorus on children. Unbelievable, Halsey. You should be ashamed.
I am. I'm telling you. I'm sitting here and I'm crying. I really just feel awful.
And Andy, if I'm correct, I heard the sound of a train in the back of Halsey's home.
I apologize.
I think
for
that it made don't apologize. I just thought it to me it reminded me of Auschwitz, but that was just a thought.
That's what I was thinking. I didn't want to say that. Halsey, are you all right? Halsey, okay?
All right. Yeah. So Ryan, are you back?
Uh-oh. He didn't look too happy about that one, JF.
No, JF will get the axe later.
Oh.
Ryan, are you back? I'm sorry, you are still muted. It seems you're having difficulty with the audio.
Ryan, you're muted, and you seem to look like a Muslim woman.
Hello, Ryan. Okay, so Arakoda, $10 US says Palestinians did ethnic genocide against native Jews over 1,000 years ago. Halsey, I wanted to ask you while Ryan fixes his audio. About this question of the intervention on the UN and the veto right of the US, do you think it was abused within the last few decades?
I'm trying to make sure that I understand. Are you talking about the specific one that he was talking about, where the US abstained, or the veto in general?
The one abstain is interesting, but the veto in general for the last 30 years.
I don't think that the United States was given the right to veto Security Council resolutions lightly. I don't think that Russia, China, and Britain and France, although I think that Britain and France have become largely irrelevant to why they deserve a veto. But at the same time, they were given to them for a reason. And that was because any of those countries realized that a conflict in any area or a conflict requiring UN troops could lead to a broader nuclear war. So they basically said, we have to give these guys veto because otherwise they'll just say, fuck it, and start firing missiles. So I don't have a problem with the U.S. using the veto power for whatever they find in their interest.
All right, Ryan, it seems that your microphone is working and then not working. Is there a way you can look at the hardware and see what's wrong? Because we do hear some spikes from you, but you disappear. So it seems like a connection problem. Do you have an alternative microphone? If you do, look at the top. You have settings, and you can set an alternative microphone. And maybe it won't be as good in terms of voice quality, but at least we can hear you. So Arakoda, $5 US, says, ask Halsey if he would support Europe becoming European ethnically again.
100%.
Okay. And so I guess that the suggestion here by Arakoda was a white ethno-state, basically.
I'm completely okay with that. I don't think that any Jew should live in Europe.
Okay, so even for Jewish people, you would be fine if they were kicked out of Europe?
100%.
Wow, that's a strong statement.
I don't believe that Jews have any business being in Europe. I think that European anti-Semitism is different. I hate that word. European anti-Jewish behavior is so rooted in culture and so far back that I don't believe it'll ever be resolved. And I just don't see that a future for European Jewry is in the interest of anybody.
Is this working?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's working.
Knowing that the state of Israel does exist, I would be 100% in support if Europe decided to assert itself against the Muslim and migrant invaders and become European countries again and be able to deal with Israel on a trade basis, on a knowledge basis, and on a basis of sometimes allies, sometimes not, but not on a basis of mutual suspicion.
No, it's bizarre almost for me because I heard you defend a different opinion for the Jews in the U.S. Can you see that the way you feel you belong to the U.S., that Jews may feel that in France, in Germany?
I can somewhat understand, but in America, there's no deep-rooted anti-Jewish phenomena. There's never been a tradition of it. Jews were around from before the country was a country. Jews have always been around in America. And in fact, the vast majority of anti-Semitic attacks that are recorded by the FBI are done by the left. So I don't believe that a ethno-state, as I said, it's not my opinion that the American experiment is going to retain 50 states forever. I believe that a white ethno-state will probably rise in the Midwest, probably spreading out to Seattle, Washington. And I wouldn't want to live there. So, I mean, and I would, if that came about and they said, we don't want Jews here, and they were sent to whatever other part of America was not going to be that white ethno-state, I wouldn't have a problem with that. So, but in Europe, I don't believe that the wounds are able to heal. I think that forever this is going to be a problem, and it's going to be something that's going to hurt people for a very long time. So no, I don't have a problem with if they said it's just time to part ways.
All right. So Ryan, you are back?
Yeah, I missed a lot of stuff because I was trying to do headphones and all this other crap. I think just the USB port just died or whatever. So
okay.
I'm not a computer person at all.
Are you using a laptop or are you using a desktop?
A desktop.
Oh, because I was about to say your laptop would have an internal mic that you can probably use, but
no. yo, Halsey, Arakoda asked for $5. Does Halsey think that Native Americans should be given land to regrow their population?
They already have been.
Okay.
But I guess that what she means is a land that is truly independent, a truly independent state.
Yeah, like a state, not just like an area.
That is not under federal regulation.
Mm.
I mean, the reservations are not under federal regulation. I mean, they're under federal regulation, but they're not subject to state law.
I mean, to regain their population a full landmass.
You see, here's the thing, and I'm quite sure that Ryan could probably speak to this. But I think you're part Native American, right?
Yep.
So I don't know enough about it, but from what I understand is that there was never a Native American nation. There were many nations within Native Americans. So I don't know if you could just say, well, you're all Native Americans, therefore we can group you together and give you a state. I don't know if they've like healed those kind of wounds, or if they feel connected as one people.
Well, they speak different languages, so that wouldn't work. But if you want to talk about Diné state or an Apache state or something, they're supposed to have sovereignty already. And it works like that in Canada, but in the US, they're under all federal regulation. They don't have independence, and it's been pretty sad state of affairs. However, Native Americans are more than welcome to live anywhere else in the United States as a Native American, as part of it, just like any other American. But as far as having an exclusive place to preserve their culture and language, which they're supposed to do, that's not really why reservations were set up. And
Of course not.
the reservation system has a horrible history. The BIA, too, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, became out of the War Department to the Department of Interior, but it's still from the War Department. And it's just been a systematic land theft and murder for Native peoples.
But let me just draw a distinction, and Ryan, I will totally defer to your opinion on this. Native Americans are more about a peoplehood than an attachment to land, correct? Like they wouldn't define borders and say this is the Apache Nation or this is the Navajo Nation, as much as they would be connected more by peoplehood.
The border would just be sort of naturally like where the language group ends. If you have Athabascan, can't communicate with Algonquin, etc., and so your border is going to be your sort of natural language border wherever people are living. But it's not so tied to territory, but it depends on who you're talking about. I mean, like Native Hawaiians would be an exception, but it depends, on the East Coast, the cultures vary so widely between Native Americans. You got to think California is as far away from Florida as England is from Russia, and they're just as different and always were. And so, and then that would extend also into the Caribbean, and we have these lines of North America, but they didn't have the same territorial lines, and a lot of them were nomadic as well. So they said this is sort of a general territory, not a settlement territory. So, but the reservation system has been a disaster, and the welfare system, just like in any U.S. city, has also been a disaster because you're stripping away people's agency. And undermining the agrarian society, etc., by giving out freebies. But I think that's off topic from this Israel debate.
We were trying not to talk about the Israel debate while you were getting set up.
Okay. I like talking about Native Americans, but we do that. Yeah. Well, shall we get back to it?
Yeah.
There was a point that I wanted to make before, just on something he had previously said, and you asked me to wait till he got back.
Okay,
is he was talking about cultural appropriation. When you look at the Temple Mount, right, there's a mosque on top of it, and that's Muslim culture, obviously. But look at what it's founded on. It's founded on 1,000-year-old Jewish structures. So the idea that there wasn't anything going on back there, or it was a shared thing, like this was hundreds of years after the Jewish expulsion by Rome, that they built Muslim structures on top of the Jewish ones. So you can easily see the archaeology going back thousands of years of Jews. It's blatant and in your face.
Yeah, there are English structures on top of Roman structures that the Romans built in England too. I mean,
the Romans have not declared themselves a unique people over the course of generations.
Yeah, it doesn't. You can't punish the present population for what happened over a period of centuries. And I wouldn't defend the other side either. I don't agree with violence and land grabs and making ethnic exclusivity or religious exclusivity. I mean, anybody can change their religion at any time. Most people don't. In the Islamic faith especially, they might change sex, I suppose. But, I don't agree with building on top of people's territory. But I don't think that's how that happened. Their Jewish population had dwindled down below 3%, and the kingdom of Judea was, as you said, hey, they lost the war, Romans took it. This is long before the Geneva Conventions, however, and I wouldn't agree with the Rome's wars either, but I mean that's sadly what happened anyway. So if you're going to go with the logic of, hey, you lost, then too bad, you lost. That was no longer your territory, and other people can take it over and live there.
All right.
All right.
Mike did go out again. I mean, okay.
No, your mic is okay. Now, I was wondering, there was also a point of contention between you two, based on the question of groups of what I call Jewish influence, and maybe Ryan will have a different term for it, but Jewish influence within America and groups that are ethnically interested and that have an impact on American politics. Ryan, I'd like you to let us know, what is your view on that question? Is there too much interventions on whether it's freedom of speech or whether it's deception for military interventions? Are organizations such as the ADL too powerful in America?
I agree with Trump's campaign rhetoric of putting America first. And there's always foreign entities that try and influence America for their own interests, for their own ends, not just Israel. But the problem is, we have this thing called FARA, which is the Foreign Registration Act, and other groups, their lobbies are capped because they're not allowed to spend money bribing politicians, because if there's an Italian lobby or a Chinese lobby or North Korean lobby, what have you. But with AIPAC has this loophole because they are effectively an unregistered foreign lobby. So they have undue influence over politicians, which drags America into doing things for Israeli interests that do not always overlap with America's own interests. And with the ADL, it's not really an anti-defamation league. That's what the title is. And now and then they will do defamation cases, but it's mainly just hunting for anti-Semites. And what they've done is conflated, there are anti-Semites, by the way, obviously, but what they've done is conflated anybody who opposes Israel's interests as being anti-Semitic, as if the only possible motivation one could have for opposing what Israel does, the settlements, etc., is just because they hate Jews. Couldn't possibly just be out of ethics or morals, or like I keep saying, it's internationally recognized, and it is illegal and it is immoral, and people do oppose that, and maybe they just don't want to pay for it. If Israel wants to do it, make them pay for it themselves. Why does it have to come out of U.S. aid? So it's not putting America first. And so, yeah, and the ADL and the SPLC, I would put them in there too. The SPLC was kind of responsible for ganking my YouTube. They've written horrible things about me, called me a Holocaust denier, said I said that Judaism advocates cannibalism and rape, and which I've never said anything like that. And, these are smear organizations, and it doesn't actually help Jews in general, because unfortunately what happens is a lot of the Zionist rhetoric and these outfits from the SPLC, ADL, AIPAC, etc., the things they say, some of them are so extreme, talking about putting Palestinians in concentration camps and stuff like that, where Lieberman was doing, and the Home Party, and the third largest party in Israeli politics, saying things like Palestinians give birth to little snakes. And so that kind of flagrant racism and extremism has a backlash towards Jews in general, which you shouldn't collectively judge all Jews by what extremists are doing, but that's the result, whether you like it or not. And so I oppose it for that reason. And yeah, obviously the AIPAC has had an enormous influence over American foreign policy, and they used to be called the ZOA, the Zionist Organization of America. Before that was the Zionist Council, and then finally settled on AIPAC. But Robert Kennedy, when he was Attorney General, gave him a moratorium, 72 hours, that they were going to have to register their lobby as a foreign agent. But then his brother was assassinated, and they kind of just dropped it, and then Johnson had no interest in it. But they've done things. They've been stealing technology and even nuclear material from the United States, and they just get a pass. And now we've got over $500 million cleanup in Apollo, Pennsylvania, where they dumped all this highly enriched uranium and nuclear waste, and that all ended up in Israel and Dimona. But who gets stuck with the bill? So it's not in America's interest. And if Trump's want to put America first, and I'm happy he wants to pull out of Syria, and I'm glad he wants to talk to North Korea, but when it comes to Israel and the Kushners, etc., that's he's deeply in their pockets. And earlier when I was talking about the UN resolution that recently passed, you know, that opened up this so-called Russia Gate with Michael Flynn, who used to work in the DIA. Well, he's the director of the DIA. And then he was going to join the Trump administration. And then, of course, we have the Robert Mueller investigation into him. And it was called Russiagate because supposedly he had tried to bribe the Russians to vote to veto this resolution. They didn't. And he wasn't only asked to do that. He was asked to contact all the Permanent Security Council members and bribe them, or, you know, pressure them, not bribe, not give them money, but pressure them to change their vote and to vote against the resolution condemning Israeli settlements. And that was the legwork for that was from Jared Kushner, who went to Flynn, and Jared Kushner was asked by Netanyahu himself. Netanyahu used to stay at the Kushner's house. He slept in Jared's bed. They have a very tight relationship. So it was the Israelis that were actually pressuring the U.S. to change its vote and pressuring Russia to change its vote, pressuring other states to change their vote on the Security Council. And the media wanted none of it. They're chasing down Russia constantly. Everything's Russia. I mean, Hillary was more than capable of losing an election all by herself. It wasn't Russian hackers. But you see this sustained anti-Russia agenda, and yet the Israelis are caught doing the exact thing that Russia was accused on, and nothing happens.
So, Halsey, do you agree with this reading of the role of Netanyahu in possibly influencing current American administrations?
Netanyahu is ridiculous as far as I'm concerned. I've never been a big fan of his, and I've been following his political career for a very long time.
We agree on something.
But what Ryan said was, again, there were a lot of leading statements in there. And he said that AIPAC would have to register under FARA, right? And that Kennedy had given them an ultimatum that they would have to register under FARA. The reason that no one has asked them to do so since then is because they would disband AIPAC in about 15 seconds. They would restate it, rename it, probably what it should be named, which is the Evangelical Christian Organization of America, because that's where the majority of their money comes from, that and very influential rich Jews. So they understand that when people show up to AIPAC events and listen to what AIPAC says, it's not because they're pandering to a Jewish Israeli lobby. They're pandering to an evangelical Christian lobby, which is a massive amount of their support. Obviously, for the Kennedys, this is not true. They're against the evangelical Christians because they've always been traditionally right-wing. Secondly, he was talking about how the UN resolution that they tried them not to do, this resolution was put to the table after Obama had already been done and Trump had been elected. So the reason that the Trump administration had decided that this was something that they wanted to stop was because they realized that Obama was strictly doing this to create a foreign policy mess for them right as they walked into the White House. So they asked the others, they said, listen, this is not going to fly once Trump takes office. So it's in your interest to not jump on this bandwagon and get this stupid UN resolution passed, because no one in America gives 1/10 of one shit about what the UN says about basically anything. So if you're thinking that you're going to empower the UN into being a world dominant organization that anyone gives a crap about, then you're just wrong. And that's exactly what they did.
Obama didn't create the UN resolution. The UN did. He was a lame duck president. The timing of that's correct. That's about all you said that was correct. So that was the timing, but they didn't do that. And I'm not endorsing the UN either. I'm saying that what they went after Michael Flynn for doing was saying that he had contacted Russia because they're looking for any kind of Russia connection to smear Donald Trump with. The reason he contacted Russia is because Kushner, on behalf of Netanyahu, had pressured him to do so to get them to change their vote for the UN. Now, whether or not Obama was just, because the UN had done that, he saw an opportunity to leave Trump with a mess, he may have. But the media is still chastising Michael Flynn, and he lost his job over this because he contacted the Russians. He also contacted everyone else. But it didn't matter that he contacted France, or it didn't matter that they're specifically looking at Russia. And why do you think the left is so anti-Russia?
Why do I think the left is so anti-Russia? Because
do you agree that they're anti-Russia, first of all? I mean, that's pretty clear.
I agree that the left is anti-Russia? Yeah.
Okay. Why do you think that is? Because this is sort of a new sustained campaign, wouldn't you say?
Why do I think that the left is so anti-Russia?
Mm-hmm.
because Putin represents everything that they despise. He is the anti-Marxist.
Now,
I
what's your
think a
view?
lot of it is Russia's entrance into the war in Syria has a lot to do with it as well. But yeah, there's definitely,
You think the
Putin.
left supports the war in Syria? Is that what you're saying?
Well, Obama and Hillary Clinton created the war in Syria and funded Al Qaeda, and they all chimed in. Bernie Sanders, Hillary, the entire Democratic nominee, every single one of them said Assad must go and toted the same line. So yeah,
Interesting.
the leadership of the left does. There are a lot of out of tune. Like Obama got elected supposedly as an anti-war president. That's what his plebs, kind of bestowed upon him. But he was never an anti-war president. He voted for every military action ever when he was a senator. And he never, they just sort of said, well, look, he's going to end these wars because they wanted somebody to be anti-Bush. But he wasn't. He was almost exactly the same as George Bush. So what they bestow upon him and what he actually was is very different. But the leftist establishment, all their leaderships in the Senate, and the Armed Service Committee, and the Secretary of State, and the President all supported war in Syria and Assad must go, and arming so-called moderate rebels. Trump cut that off last July. He said, we're cutting off all CIA funding to any rebel groups. And then you quickly saw ISIS lose territory because everybody knows the FSA was a conduit to arm the not moderate rebels, the Islamic State. They're arming Al Qaeda.
So then
as they had done before.
I have a serious question then, if this is what you're saying, is that I've heard you say on your autistic streams on YouTube that Syria was all about Israel and was all about Israel. If you're saying the left are the ones that are perpetuating Syria and wanting war in Syria, they were the most anti-Israel regime that the world has ever seen in the U.S. John Kerry has been giving the Palestinians advice on how to get by the Trump years until they can come back in and really treat them well. Like Hillary Clinton was not a good Secretary of State to Israel. Obama was a disaster for the entire Middle East, but specifically for Israel. And now you're claiming
that Israel's foreign aid more than any other president.
As I've said repeatedly, I wish they would cut that foreign aid. I don't believe that Israel is the beneficiary of that foreign aid. I think that America is, and I would wish they would cut it tomorrow. So I don't believe that Obama did that because it's in the interest of Israel. I think Obama did that because it's in the interest of America. And I think that it's a very bad deal for Israel because it restricts their arms sales to countries like India, which have 1.2 billion people that would happily buy Kafir jets, Merkava tanks, and Tabor submachine guns and be worth $3 billion. I mean, that would be a drop in the piss bucket for what Israel could make on their arms sales if they didn't have to give all of their technology to America for this aid that America gives them, which also has to be spent on American military goods.
75% of it's earmarked on military goods. It's not beneficial for the U.S. or Israel. It's only beneficial for a cabal, a clique of profiteers within the MIC. It doesn't expand American interest or Israeli interest.
The Tabor submachine gun, the Iron Dome, the David Sling anti-missile system. These are all systems that are now in America's possession and are now manufactured exclusively in America. That is not profiteering. That is getting
the Iron Dome and the Patriot missile system are overhyped. I mean, before Iron Dome, when there were, they lost 3 people. After Iron Dome, they lost 3 people. A lot of these things are just expensive military misadventures. You know, they're talking about mostly kids throwing rocks and unguided rockets.
Have you ever, unguided rockets. Iranian-made Fajar 26 missiles that have the ability to hit Tel Aviv are just homemade rockets. I love the bullshit.
Iran is not attacking
when you
Israel.
want to do that. No, Iran sells the military goods to Hamas that they use to attack Israel. Look at the Karine. Arafat got caught red-handed. Bill Clinton refused to talk to him from the Iranian military goods that were sent undercover to Hamas to use against Israel. And the Iron Dome, I've seen it from my balcony work. So I have not seen it just on TV. I've never checked out, oh, well, maybe it means this or maybe it means that. I have heard a missile siren go off, looked up in the sides, saw the missile, and then watched another missile come up and hit it. And guess what? It's on my YouTube channel. I recorded it with my cell phone. So if you want to go check it out, go check it out. It works well.
I talked to Ted Postal from MIT, who's an actual rocket scientist about it.
You have not seen it work. I've seen it with my eyes work.
So I've interviewed rocket scientists about it. Actual rocket scientists from MIT. You can go see Ted Postal's report about the Iron Dome. and it's overhyped. It's, of course you want to block missiles, and we have like THAAD's the same thing. They have THAAD in South Korea. They have THAAD coming to Japan. It seems like probably. And I actually sat in it. Go ahead.
And also, I was just saying, LM $5 US sends us a comment on an earlier point. So, Democrat public officials support AIPAC to gain evangelical support. I mean, come on, dude. And Darius Ashkeni brings a comment on the current discussion. He says, Trump is trying to start a war with Iran. Fucking talk about this. It seems like an important subject, so I'd like to hear you both on is Trump starting a war with Iran, and what are your current views on the role of Iran in military interventions right now?
You want to go first?
Ryan
Sure.
first.
I think it's mostly rhetoric. I mean, he couldn't even tear up the Iran deal. He just kicked it over to Congress. It's a lot of window dressing. Trump is trying to roll back the military and bring it home. Like, have a strong military so you can never use it, is what he keeps saying. But there seems to be a tug of war within the administration, because there are certainly a lot of people who do want to go to war with Iran in his administration. But Trump is more keen on saying, why, how many places can we be? Now he'll talk it up, because this is, if you read Art of the Deal, it's what he does. He overplays things so that he has room to scale back. But by looking at just the Iran deal alone, and the fact that he's now fighting with his military people, saying he wants to get out of Syria, how long do we got to stay there? He doesn't want to start another war. I think a lot of it's just kind of the paranoia on the internet. If everybody thinks the dollar's going to collapse tomorrow, World War III is around the corner, and I don't buy into it.
So Trump has done everything that every president in the past could have done to stop a war in Iran. And in fact, he did it by going after North Korea. Iran does not have the capability to make a nuclear device, test it on a long-range missile, and then miniaturize it, which is an essential part of the nuclear development process. North Korea doesn't matter. They can do whatever the hell they want. There's been multiple documented cases of Iranian scientists at North Korean nuclear tests. And by taking on North Korea, you are literally cutting off the ability of the mullahs to test intercontinental ballistic missiles and to test nuclear-capable devices to be miniaturized onto those missiles. By dealing with North Korea, there is no chance of a war with Iran.
Maybe
Right,
one super chat right here. John Michael Cornett, $10. Evangelical Christians make up the biggest pro-Israel bloc in the U.S. Support for Israel is stronger among American evangelicals than it is among American Jews. From PRI.
This is definitely true.
Yeah, mostly the votes come from evangelicals, and a lot of money comes from Jewish billionaires.
That's interesting.
But as far as the voting bloc goes, the evangelicals don't have that much money. A lot of their churches are actually divesting. The Presbyterian Church divested, the Methodist Church divested. But those are regular churches. The evangelical wing, though, they're not influencing them so much by cash as they are as a large voting bloc, because they have a closer relationship because of religion with Judaism. They share the same creation story and so on. They believe that Temple on the Mount thing to bring Jesus back, which is actually a bad thing because it also comes with lots of destruction. But that's how the preachers have it. So there's a combination of Christian Zionists along with Jewish Zionists, and they have different motivations, but the same result.
I know that John Hagee's organization gave over, like, not them themselves, but through their parishioners, gave over, I think, $1 billion to Israel in just 1 year alone. The evangelical money goes to Israel like crazy. There was actually a big argument within Israel as whether it was appropriate to take it or not, because of the religious aspect of it. So at this point, they're pretty much in lockstep. There is a strong religious component, not just that they believe in Judaism, and Judaism believes in the strength of Christianity. It's more of an end of days prophecy thing. And there's also a passage that says you'll be blessed by Israel if you bless Israel. So it's a very strong religious component to it.
And in support of that, John Michael Cornett, $5 US, says, according to a Bloomberg poll, 60% of evangelicals say the US should support Israel even if its interests diverge with American interests. So I think that there's a lot more agreement than I expected in this conversation.
Actually, Jeff,
You guys have... Yeah?
I have a question. Ryan, what do you think about
Yep.
the USS Liberty?
Oh God.
Yeah, I'll talk about the Liberty in a second. There was something I said that maybe because I just said so many things that one of the points was missed, but I wanted to talk about what happened in Apollo. Halsey, are you familiar with NUMEC?
Possibly. I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's how Israel got the bomb.
Okay.
It was,
Is this where you're going to go into how Israel killed JFK? I've been waiting for this. Hold on.
No, this is
let me
the
get my snack
Nuclear
ready.
Materials and
Hold on.
Equipment Corporation.
I had to throw the wrench in there. Go ahead.
Wait, what is that? A banana?
Yeah. The banana
eating
level
a
of this is
banana?
about to go through the roof.
This
so
is my move. I eat fruits in debates.
I love fruit. Why can't I eat fruit? I like bananas.
Okay, you can eat fruit. So what about this program that you say this is how Israel acquired the nuclear bomb?
NUMEC stands for the Nuclear Materials and Equipment Corporation. And yes, it does. It is the story of how Israel got its nuclear weapons, because I said earlier in Apollo, there's a $500 million cleanup for residents in Pennsylvania where this place was polluted and irradiated. And if you'd like, I can explain
Please.
what happened in NUMEC briefly. You had Zalman Shapiro, you may know him. Do you know Zalman Shapiro? The
Possible.
Nautilus program.
Sure.
You don't know what I'm talking about. Well, he helped make nuclear submarines. He's pretty much a genius. And then a man named David Lowenthal, who is more the money guy. Those two set up this thing called NUMEC in Apollo, Pennsylvania. You could think of Shapiro as the brains. He was a metallurgist and chemist, and Lowenthal was the finance. And they created this company to produce highly enriched uranium for the U.S. Navy. But the entire time, they were skimming it and sending uranium, highly enriched uranium, to Israel, to Dimona. Now, Israel had a nuclear reactor set up during the Atoms for Peace program under Eisenhower, and it opens up in 1964. I think 64. But the Oak Ridge, which was the U.S.'s first nuclear facility, they noticed a lot of inventory differences coming out of NUMEC where there was missing uranium. Glenn Seaborg did an investigation. He was from the Atomic Energy Agency, or Commission. And they found that back in the 60s already 178 kilograms of uranium was missing. And NUMEC actually borrowed $2 million to pay for this missing uranium. And they're wondering, where did it go? And they tried every excuse possible of, how it just got lost in the process. But that is just way too much uranium to cover up. And to put this in perspective for people who aren't sciencephiles, that you need about 10 to 5 kilograms of highly enriched uranium to make a nuclear bomb. And they had over 178 kilograms missing in the 60s, and that number would climb up to over 287 kilograms. And so there was this mystery of where did it go? But when they finally looked at the founders of NUMEC, all Zionists, by the way, the CIA decided to investigate. So they had John Haddon. He was the CIA station chief in Tel Aviv. He went out around Dimona, and they did some tests on the flora and the surrounding environment. And they found something very peculiar, that they were looking for plutonium because the French had helped Israel with a plutonium processing plant in exchange over the Suez crisis. And they didn't find plutonium. They found uranium-235, and the signature was enriched to 97.7%. Now, to make a power plant, you need to enrich uranium to about 3%. To make a nuclear bomb, you want to get it above 90%. Only one nation had it at 97.7%, and that was the U.S., and specifically for the U.S. Navy for nuclear submarines. And so undoubtedly, this uranium had been diverted from Pennsylvania to Israel in secret and illegally, breaking all kinds of arms export control acts there through the auspice of Zalman Shapiro, David Lowenthal, and a lot of these arms smugglers, Ernst David Bergman and these fellows. And the CIA was aware of it. And then you have Richard Helms was told about it by Carl Duckett. He took the findings of the National Intelligence Estimate to Richard Helms. Richard Helms is a DCI for the CIA. That's Director of Central Intelligence. And he took it to Lyndon Johnson. And Lyndon Johnson said not to tell anyone, not even Dean Rusk, who was the Secretary of State, or not even McNamara, obviously the Secretary of Defense. So he put the kibosh on it. But because of this fiasco and stealing uranium for a number of years, they finally sell the company over to Atlantic Richfield, and then the Atlantic Richfield sold it to B&W. It's Babcock and Wilcox Company, and they ended operations in 1978. But they got them dead to rights. The CIA found the highly enriched uranium in Israel, and then there were also eyewitnesses of the diversion, and they were putting highly enriched uranium in radiators, which they were sending to Israel. They had this deal with this the equivalent of the Israeli Atomic Energy Agency. And you can send radiators legally, but you're not supposed to pack them with highly enriched uranium. And it's very dangerous as well. But this was going on. It's witnessed on the docks in New York. And so Israel was just openly stealing uranium from the United States. CIA knew, the president was told, the FBI was informed, but Johnson didn't want to move on it. And, it quietly changes hands. But now the result is, okay, Israel has nuclear weapons. Prior to that, the Kennedys were trying to inspect Dimona because they already suspected it. That's why the CIA went there before they even knew about New Mex. But ever since Kennedy, they've never been inspected. Israel's never allowed inspections of Dimona. It's kind of an open secret that they have nuclear weapons. There have been U.S. congressmen that have mentioned it offhand, hundreds of nuclear warheads. But they're not signed to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, as other nuclear powers are, and they stole the technology and physical material from the United States. And now people in Pennsylvania are left with this Army Corps of Engineers estimated over $450 million to clean up the mess. And so this is definitely not in U.S. interest. Israel secretly stole and created nuclear weapons against U.S. interests, well, with the exception of Lyndon Johnson, through the New Mex scandal. And there's a good book on that called Divert by Grant Smith. And there's another one written by Roger Madsen called Stealing the Atomic Bomb, How Denial and Deception Armed Israel. And that was an issue that I just said about the cleanup costs without explaining the story. So I thought I'd give the background on it. It's a huge ordeal to steal nuclear weapons from a sovereign state. You think that would be kind of front page news, but very few people are aware of what happened at all. Why do you think that is? The media is not interested in the story of nuclear weapons being stolen from the United States. It should show the power of the MI6 and the lobby to cover up something so huge.
Halsey, do you agree with this reading? First, with the factual description that the nuclear bomb was stolen to the U.S., and then on the lobby controlling the information on that?
I don't know about the lobby controlling the information. It's never been a very well kept secret that Israel has a nuclear device, and that they have up to 200 of them at this point. Their official policy is ambiguity, but I mean, they have nuclear submarines that are capable of launching Trident missiles from there with nuclear weapon tips. So I don't doubt that they have it. And if it was given to them by someone in Pennsylvania, I mean, I don't understand how that's connected to there's a mess out there and therefore it needs to be cleaned up. One has nothing to do with the other, and he knows that. I mean,
the mess was to cover up. I'll explain better.
No.
The reason for the mess.
Wait a minute.
Go ahead.
What he's overlooking is that, number one, at the time that Israel developed the nuclear bomb, the reason they did it was because they were constantly being pawned off as a proxy war with Russia, between the U.S. and Russia. And they knew that, unlike Turkey, that Kennedy and probably even Johnson, who was a pretty sympathetic person to Israel, that no one was going to station Jupiter missiles in Israel, and Israel cannot absorb a nuclear strike. There's no way. It's the size of New Jersey. So if it was done clandestinely, if it was done underhandedly, I mean, that sucks, I guess. I mean, I don't know how I'm supposed to answer for something done in the 50s, but at the same time, I'm glad they have the nuclear triad. I think that them being nuclear armed has stopped many Middle Eastern wars, just like it stopped in the Cold War, us actually having a real war with China and Russia, I mean, with Russia and later on with China. So I thank you. Is that a good answer?
The reason for the mess is when they have so much missing uranium, they have to explain where did it go. And it was a way to stall. It was very hard to go inspect nuclear waste and determine, how much is here, how much is over there. And some of it was being spilled, or they just didn't care about the environment and the rush to get as much uranium to Israel as possible. But it kind of serves as cover for at least portion of that. It makes me say, well, look how polluted it is. Maybe we were just really bad and lost some of it in the environment. But the degree, the level that was missing, it just could not be explained that way. Plus, they found it later in Israel anyway. Yes, it was done clandestinely. And the other point is, then why not, sign the non-proliferation treaty and allow inspections? Because if not, that opens up black markets to sell this junk if you're not having inspections. And whether it's polonium, which was found in the UK, or going into Chechnya or whatever, there are always questions of where this is coming from, and it could be cleared up very fast if they would allow inspections and just admit what the whole world knows, that they have nuclear weapons. And yes, they stole them from the United States. But what I'm interested in is, like, you could say, well, they should have nukes and it's good they have nukes because it's a deterrent. That's not my issue. My issue is that they stole them from the United States, and that the press has just been pretty much dead silent on that. Not so much the newspapers, but the televised press. And I find that interesting. As to me, that shows the power of the relationship, especially between the LBJ administration, who did not even want to tell the Secretary of State or Secretary of Defense about what the CIA had found. And that, because I got asked about the Liberty, and that's going to go back to Johnson. So I just want to establish how tight he was with the Israeli state, that he was helping them cover up stealing nuclear material from America, which America could have just sold to them. But that wasn't in the public interest, and it would have definitely caused a reaction from Russia doing the same thing and caused a proliferation, and we were supposed to be doing the opposite. So maybe they're looking away on purpose. Maybe they wanted them to have the bomb and couldn't sell it to them. They can have lots of possible, it's all speculation, reasons why they let them steal it. But the CIA certainly wasn't happy about it. That's why they did investigations about it. The Justice Department wasn't happy about it. But the president pretty much squashed it.
All right. Before we move to the USS Liberty, I'd read a few super chats. Saltwater, $20 Canadian, says, Ryan, I'm imagining you reclined in your chair at like 85 degrees with one hang just dangling and the other thrown on your lap. Can you take off that cringy avatar, turn on your webcam, and turn on your energy? On that comment, I will say, in defense of Ryan, he is in Japan, and he is at a time in Japan where most people would sleep. On the dark side, it leads us to have Ryan being very calm in his tone. On the bright side, he lives with an Asian woman all around him.
Yeah, smashing it.
It's morning in Japan, isn't it?
Yeah, I also have a 2-month-old, so I had to get up a lot last night. That could be why I'm lethargic. I'm also this stuff kind of depresses me. You just had 17 people murdered in a turkey shoot in Gaza, and I don't, to me, this isn't an egotistical thing, like trying to put someone down or whatever. Like, people are getting killed. This is a real issue. This is a real problem that I would like to resolve. Like, I don't want Israelis or Palestinians getting killed. I don't want wars in Iraq. I don't want any of this stuff. And so it's depressing to me. And I'm kind of calm. I'm pretty sleepy. And then I had some problems with my mic. But yeah, I'm chill at it. I talk about this stuff every day, so it doesn't work me up. Like, I don't get angry. I just kind of like, oh, I've heard this 100 times, and I know what you're about to say, and just kind of, it's boring to me because I deal with it all the time.
Brian W, $100. Thank you, Andy, for hours of entertainment and political discussions. Love what you, JF, Tonka, and all those like you are doing. Thank you for that huge donation, Brian. We really appreciate it and love you there. And
let me use that for 1 second to shill. I think I'm on the Kumite on Monday morning.
So
nice. I hope everybody. I believe it's at 11 a.m. I hope you all tune in to see another
11:30. 11:30. He starts at 11 Eastern. And starts for half an hour of intros, and then he starts it. I'll see you on there for sure. I'm there every day.
Awesome.
Who are you debating?
I've never a guy named Diogenes.
Oh yeah.
I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but I mean, we've been kind of having some shit talking in DM, and I'm really it's a pure JQ debate.
All right.
So I'm kind of looking forward to it.
Oh, by the way, just so you know, Tonka got a strike on his channel today.
Great.
Oh.
So he's gone again twice in 3 days. They do have a secondary channel, but yeah. So just gonna let you know about that. I'll let you know what's going on in DMs. And Valentine, $50. Many American evangelical Christians have bad theology. Dispensationalism, is that how you say that word? Is really culprit.
What is it? Dispensation. Oh my god, dispensationalism.
I was fucking close. 110 IQ, by the way, just so you all know.
It's a tough one.
Is really culprit. Evangelicals can and should support Israel, but not based on faulty theology.
And we have Dorman 360, $5 US, says, showing my support for this great stream and hot debate. Disappointed to hear evangelicals support foreign regimes so much. America first. And that is also the name of the Nick Fuentes show, I believe, America First. Now going back to the subject, which was a subject of contention between Halsey and Nick Fuentes, the question of the USS Liberty.
Yeah.
It seems from my remembering that Halsey is stating that this was an accident, that he believes what he calls the official version. And I think, Ryan, you have a disagreement on that.
No, wait. First I have, before we get to that, I just want to address one point about the development of the nuclear bomb.
Okay.
And the reason that America supported, or whether I don't know whether they openly supported it, didn't support it, whether they turned a blind eye, it's all irrelevant to me. The reason that they saw a nuclear bomb being developed in Israel and didn't have a problem with it was they saw this as the protection of American values in a very hostile neighborhood, which is why they also supported Israel working with South Africa to do the exact same thing. And obviously the apartheid wall fell and they had to cut off all kind of cooperation with the South African government. And just so you see, this is the result. So if they're trying to say this was a bad thing, because after all, again, we're going back to the United Nations and what they have to say about anything, then I don't understand how the proof being that look what happened in South Africa to the white population as being the result of the lack of deterrent and the fact that Israel has been able to deter itself from a major war since it basically declared that it had the bomb. I don't understand how the result, it can be questioned as, well, the press are ignoring it. I don't think they're ignoring it. I don't think they see much of a story there. And because the press is entirely leftist, I think they want to really, really, really cover up the idea that a nuclear deterrent can actually work.
I don't agree at all with the horrible things that are happening in South Africa with white farmers being tortured and burned and their land taken from them. The same reason as Palestinians. I disagree regardless of what happened in the past, because yes, they abused Africans in the past, but not them, just their collectively, people who look like them took land by force. But that doesn't give Black Africans the right to go into farms and murder people just because they're white and confiscate their property any more than it does Zionists to take private property from Palestinians. But I'm not sure how a nuclear bomb is going to act as a deterrent in South Africa to bomb South Africa. I don't think a nuclear weapon is what they need. But the leftist media doesn't talk about what's happening in South Africa. And a lot of it's because of this SJW stigma that if you say anything that any minority is doing that's bad, then you will be colored as racist. And, look, it's not racist to say stop colonizing and stop confiscating land and torturing and burning and murdering people. As the done to each other with different tribal groups in not only South Africa, but many places in Africa where there's ongoing genocide.
But you just said something that I find interesting, because you disputed in Israel, and despite the mountains of evidence of it being true in Israel and being true in South Africa, these were not highly populated by indigenous populations. There was hardly anyone there. The Arabs and the blacks that migrated into South Africa did so because the work was there from the white colonists. There was no ownership of the land. Just because someone lives 100 miles away from something doesn't mean they own everything outward until another person is found. There was not a significant black population there. And that's why there's now this weird idea that they're reclaiming something that they never had in the first place. And that's the same thing that's going on in Israel. And I don't know how you can make that claim morally, that all of a sudden, because there's a population of Westerners that's under attack somewhere, and that they're surrounded by hostile non-white actors, that all of a sudden you can say, yes, but they came and they didn't belong there, or they didn't want to be there, or something like that. But deterring your family from getting killed is in the interest of your group, no matter what the circumstances. Even if you were being honest, which you're not, about the indigenous population, then the idea that all of a sudden they should just say, oh, okay, I have a great idea, let's leave. You know, or I have a great idea, let's screw the fact that we own all of a sudden you can say yes, but let's just let it be taken and let us be butchered in the streets, because after all, social justice. So I don't understand why this actually becomes a thing. But before I get accused of it, because your chat loves to accuse me of every kind of, like, you know, subversion, like, JF, this is where you could do the Halsey thing if you want. You know what I'm saying? But at the same time, the idea of we want to get back to the liberty. And I want to address this clearly, because JF, you kind of misrepresented what I said. This is something that happened in a war a long time ago, before I was born.
Before you get to the liberty, can I respond to what you just said about...
Let's have the response first.
Because, like, I think you just heard and then argued with your own assumption instead of listening to what I actually said. And the excuse of, well, there was hardly anyone there. I mean, in Palestine, you're talking about 800,000 people got expelled. It's like about triple the population.
Jews got expelled from Arab lands. Sounds about equal to me.
Two wrongs don't make a right, and
sometimes they make you feel
better. The population of Iceland, you can't just say, well, you know, like, how many people does it have to be before it's wrong to confiscate private property? And what's happening to whites in South Africa, it doesn't matter what happened in history, what all crime, who did what to who. This is a crime in and of itself. You can't justify it by previous crimes, and you can't do the same thing in Palestine either.
In Palestine, no matter what whites did, openly supports suicide bombers against Israeli targets. Is the government of Palestine
suicide bombers?
The government of I'm not talking about you. Come on, don't be a fucking idiot. I'm talking about the fact that the government of Palestine pays salaries to the families of people that die in suicide attacks on targets in Israel and killing children. That when the Fogel's house was broken into and the Palestinian terrorist cut the throat of an 8-month-old baby before murdering her whole family, do you know what they did? They named a square after him. They acknowledged him as a hero. And you're saying that, oh, they can't be held... Fuck no, they can be held responsible. You can be held responsible when you decide to go in and act like a fucking barbarian anywhere that you want. And if you think that all of a sudden, because there's going to be some sad pictures on the news, I don't give a flying shit if it means that you have to nuke a fucking city to keep someone from coming into your house and butchering your children. And in South Africa, they are fighting off the same fucking thing as they are in Israel. So the idea that, yes, it's so sad that things happen, but you know what? If you don't act like a fucking animal, then maybe you won't get treated like one.
Well, then that's the same argument black Africans could make. Hey, these whites acted like fucking animals. They came in here and enslaved us and butchered us and tortured us and murdered us. And so now we're justified in killing white farmers. And if you want to get into baby killing, Israel's way ahead in the scoreboard there. I mean, just in recent history, they went in, the Hilltop Boys, settlers went in and set fire to Palestinian houses, burned a baby, burned the mother and father.
What happened to them?
A little 7-year-old that's still alive now.
What happened to them?
They got 2 months administrative detention and are out.
No, that isn't what happened to them. They found that there was actually no proof that the ones who did it. And they are actually still investigating. They actually talk about the investigation quite often in Israeli press, if you look at it. And not any time have I seen someone go in and murder a baby and have Israelis start naming, I don't know, cities after them, paying them salaries, and start hailing them as national heroes when they murder a child in cold blood. And secondly,
well, Israel actually does award people mass murderers, elects them as prime ministers. Even the entire Jewish agency, which became the first Israeli government, was born out of terrorists. You had, I mean, before we talk about the Liberty, you might want to mention the Patria, which I was thought something that you would bring up, because that's when terrorists burned a ship, blew up a ship full of Jews and killed 212 Jews.
Are you talking about the Alphalena?
I'm talking about the Patria. It was blown up by Zionist Jews who killed other Jews who were leaving Palestine. They killed 55 British sailors and 212 Jews. Most of the ones that died were children. It was actually Palestinian fishermen and things that went out and rescued the ones who did survive. I guess they didn't see what was coming down the road, but violence doesn't justify violence. That's what I'm saying. It's not right for blacks to kill whites in South Africa, even though whites in South Africa a long time ago did nasty things to blacks. And it's not right for Palestinians or Israelis to kill each other and say, well, you killed us, so we can kill you. It's just a cyclical violence if you're going to do that. And yeah, Hamas has paid suicide bombers. The Israeli state has also paid people, their military, to blow people up. They don't have to commit suicide because they have F-15s and things. So they, Hamas doesn't have an F-15. They use a suicide belt. The other side, it's got tanks and artillery and all this high-tech Western military, and they blow up houses, they blow up agricultural farms, they blow up the Gaza University. I interviewed an artist, a 16-year-old girl, Maud Malak. Her neighbors were murdered that she grew up with in their house, in their bedroom, from the most moral army. And that was part of the pillar of God. Over 1,000 Palestinians were murdered. They killed thousands of civilians in Beirut. So, I mean, they just shot civilians last week. They killed 18 people in a turkey shoot, and they said, oh, they're all Hamas. And then most of the neocon media is being silent on this and hoping it's going to go away. But I mean, they released video. They show a boy. His name was Abdel Nabi. He was rolling a tire back from the fence toward the crowd, and he gets shot in the back. And they said, oh, that's just edited Hamas propaganda. And then more videos released from multiple angles. And that's just what happened. You have a woman walking with the Palestinian flag. She's shot. The man's not even in the protest, smoking a cigarette, shot in the face. This stuff is on film. It's coming out. It's been a disastrous PR war for Israel this week. But the Palestinians knew they'd get that reaction. And I disagree with this, but I guess I'm not in their shoes, but I think they're saying, at least in Gaza, that, people without freedom, life's not worth living. They had to know if they got too near to the cage walls that the Israelis would shoot them. And they did. And I guess they're willing to die if it was going to get international attention on the incident, because nothing else has worked. They lived under a blockade. Live under a fucking blockade.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Wait. Now you've made an accusation, and I get to counter. You love talking about the Israeli blockade when Israel actually left Gaza and left it completely to them. But what you conveniently ignore is the blockade is just as important. Wait until I finish. The blockade is equally enforced on the southern border by Egypt, actually a lot harsher than it is by Israel. And I don't hear you decrying Egypt's blockade of the Palestinians. Egypt built a 20-meter metal slate that they put into the ground so Hamas couldn't dig tunnels under it. And they said that if they catch any of them trying to dig tunnels under it, they would flood it. So I don't understand how you're so upset about the cage that they put around Gaza to keep terrorists out of their country, just like we want to put up a wall to keep Mexicans out of America. I don't understand how that's only Israel is to blame when it's being enforced by another country.
Well, you're wrong about me not decrying Egypt. I made films about Egypt. Egypt does have, they've cut off electricity. They've cut off the border. And that's in large part because, Morsi had reopened the Suez Canal, and I'm not going to get into Libya and all that. But when Sisi came into power, his opposition is the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas are a Sunni sect of Islam. They kind of consider them cousins. And he doesn't want Palestinian refugees flooding into Egypt because that would build up the Muslim Brotherhood's base and undermine his own power. So Egypt is in it for its own interest. Egypt is also the second highest recipient of U.S. foreign aid. Before that, you had Mubarak, and they paid him off, and it was the same kind of situation. You saw 3 revolutions in a row, military junta. And so Sisi has his reasons also for locking up his southern side of the cage on Gaza. And they didn't just leave Gaza, they relocated to the West Bank. The settlements went from Gaza to the West Bank, paid for by the U.S. dime.
I don't know about paid for by the U.S. dime because that's bullshit. But
Well,
at the same time, I have no problem with that.
Go ahead.
My cousin
called the roadmap.
He doesn't live in the West Bank. His entire community was relocated to southern Israel in the Negev. So I don't understand how you say, oh, they all went to the West Bank. That's actually not true. And you know it's not true.
They got offered
That's the thing that I
55
love is that you know these things are not true because I hear you contradicting yourself in all of your different videos. You'll say one day that it is true, and then you'll say one day that it isn't. Then you'll say they left, and you say they didn't really leave. And then you're always saying something just to prove your point that Israel is always to blame for no matter what it is that happens in the Middle East. That seems to be your recurring.
No, Israel's not to blame for everything in the Middle East, but they are to blame for blockading Gaza. That's not Gaza blockading itself.
I don't understand why you think that enforcing a border is a problem.
It's not enforcing just like you're not allowed to come move here. It's not just about right of return. They're not allowed to trade. They can't have international trade. They can't have goods. They can't. I mean, they basically live off of UN aid. I mean, it's a total welfare state. It's an open door prison. A lot of people call it. I think we're deflecting away from the liberty. And I know you're probably fucking tired of this issue. And
here's the thing. Let me just say this because this might just make it a lot easier.
On this, whatever.
No, what I'm saying is that JF characterized my idea of the liberty as different than what I actually believe about it. I don't know what went into the whole attack on the liberty. I haven't really looked into it so far, but it happened a long time ago before I was even born. And I don't understand what, even if it was a 100% intentional act, I don't understand what that has anything to do with today. Pearl Harbor was an intentional attack by Japan. I don't think that America is about to start, enforcing trade sanctions on Japan over that. I mean, the Lusitania was sunk by the Germans.
Is that what you're saying?
But I'm saying
they actually put trade sanctions on Japan before Pearl Harbor.
I know, but I'm just saying that I don't know what going down the conspiracy rabbit hole is with the liberty when I don't understand how we can debate it. When I don't claim to know what really happened, and I don't see how it has any matter on today.
I mean, Ryan can
you're roboting.
You're
roboting.
Well, you're Mike's
really bad. Mad robot.
Okay.
Did my mic fuck up again?
No, that's JF. He sounds like a robot.
Is that better?
No, I'll just get out of the call and come back in. It usually resets it.
So let me address this real quick on the liberty part that I had with Fuentes. Right at the time that I had that kind of blow up with Fuentes, we were just yelling. There wasn't a lot of like laying out a story or laying out what either of us believe. It was a lot of yelling and craziness. And I, as I said, I just accept the official story because I don't have any reason to look into it further because I don't understand what benefit it would have to me to find out the official story wasn't real. So I just don't know. But at the same time, I mean, like at the time, me and Nick Fuentes were obviously ready to kill each other on this stream. And lately I've been following him and I think that he's been doing a lot of really good things. In fact, I said so publicly. So, I mean, I don't know why opinions matter when it's in the heart of battle. If it turns out that something may or may not be true, if you're willing to correct the record later and say, I just don't know, or I made a mistake or I misspoke, like, I don't understand what the liberty has to do with anything.
Well, I have a question for you here from Adolf Honkler, $10. Andy, please ask Halsey if he supports. I'm sorry, I don't know this Jewish word. It's actually a Jewish word. I'm not being fucking.
Metziza b'peh.
Yeah, metziza b'peh. The drinking of the blood of the freshly circumcised penis by the Mohol circumcision rabbi. Is that where like the rabbi like circumcises the kid and then like uses his mouth to stop the blood?
It's not. He doesn't use it to stop the blood. If
he
you
just
make
sucks
an
his
incision,
dick. He just sucks the baby's dick. Is that what he does?
So let me answer. Whenever there's blood, there's tissue cut. You have to draw blood from it.
So suck that.
Otherwise, it could lead to a blood clot, and that's been known long before medicine even came about. There's some extreme Hasidic sects that believe that because it was always done with the mouth, that it should still be done with the mouth. It's not a prolonged process, but you're talking about a very small group of Jews.
Do you support it? Do you support it? Yes or no?
God forbid.
No.
I think that anybody who practices it should be locked up. So
all right,
there's been a
cool,
couple
perfect.
cases
All
in
right,
like
awesome.
Hasidic enclaves where people have given like babies herpes and they've died from it.
Yeah,
So-
yes, exactly. Like hashtag not all Jews suck babies' dicks. How did anyone think that was a good idea? Who's like, yeah, no one's gonna frown on this. Like, that's the first. If you're gonna suck a baby's dick, that's the first thing you think. This might have some social ramifications. I don't know how you feel, JF.
Yeah, I remember Mike Enoch trying to troll Atheism Plus with this custom and saying, "Yeah, you should be offended by this if you're atheist. There's some religious people sucking babies' dick." And is my sound better?
Yeah, it's fine.
All right. So I want to apologize. My electricity was cut. So
Listen, we brought it up
just
at the
like in
meeting.
Egypt.
We brought it
just
up
like
at
the
the SOC this week that we were going to cut you off a couple times, you and Dawson, throw you off your game a little bit.
So I want to answer Halsey's point. The reason I bring back the USS Liberty, first, I wasn't aware that you have you're saying you have changed your view, or that you've expressed being less certain since the debate with Fuentes. Is that it?
I'm saying that I wasn't and I said this at the time as well, that I hadn't looked that far into it, and that I just accepted the official story because I didn't understand what it would mean. And I don't have such an interest in it that I've looked into it so much further and accept or don't accept anything. But you're not going to have a gotcha moment where you say, "Oh, he's wrong," because I'm telling you, I don't know that much about it.
No, and it's not what I'm looking for. But I'm thinking, since we're talking about cases where the interests of America have been in conflict with the interest of Israel, and see historically what has happened. And we had the case of the nuclear bomb, which is an interesting one. And we have this one, which Ryan seemed to have some differences of interpretation. And he seems to be saying that it's not even a conspiracy theory, that the current documents that are available demonstrate that this was an intentional bombarding used for strategic purpose for defending Israel's interests. And it becomes important to the extent that when the conflict between Israel and American politics is at play, and when I hear that there are official stories denying the facts that we know of, I'm interested in what has been denied, and to the advantage of who.
Okay, I mean, if we
talk about it yet or not,
please go ahead. I'll say what I got to say after you're done.
I mean, I get it. Like, okay, you didn't really look into it, and you were emotional with Nick Fuentes and screaming at each other. But I didn't even hear that part. I don't think. But whatever. I mean, I can tell you, the Liberty. It did start as a conspiracy, like right afterward. But since from about 2006 on, it's been thoroughly gone through it. I didn't bring it up. Like, I'm going to talk about it because that's what they asked me, and maybe you don't care about it because it happened a long time ago. But
no, I'm just saying I want you to talk about it, because if you do actually have some info that could be interesting, I'm not opposed to hearing it. So,
all right. Well, I'll tell everyone what's come out, and I think it's important. I don't think it was that long ago either, and there's still survivors, who are. Like Jim Ennis was in a body cast for, I think, over a month and survived, and saw his comrades gutted up with machine guns and stuff. And they were actually given a gag order not to talk about it, which is because, the greater picture, like, you're going to disrupt our ally and But these men had to suffer through this. And the original story was it was a mistaken identity. Like maybe they thought it was an Egyptian boat because they were at war with Egypt. But obviously it wasn't an Egyptian boat. And so the argument was, well, then it was an accident, and that's what they finally settled on. But I mean, that's because Admiral McCain gave what's his name, Admiral Kidd, I forget his first name, it'll come to me in a minute, but they only gave him a week to investigate, which was a joke. And so is it Isaac Kidd? That was his name, Isaac Kidd. And so that it was all squashed. LBJ had no interest in seeing what happened, but it's come out. There was Air Force Captain Richard Black. He was commanding more than 100 intelligence analysts and cryptologists, and he was monitoring Middle East communications. And he saw the Telica, the English translation from the Hebrew, and they also found this in Athens. You can look all this up after I say this. And it says, one of the pilots is saying, "This is an American ship. Do you still want us to attack?" Yes, follow orders. That's what ground control told him. This is corroborated by transcripts that were seen by a man named Nor Forslund, also James Gotcher. He said, complete the mission and get out. And Dwight Porter. Dwight Porter also said, they said, but sir, it's an American ship. It's an American ship. And that's the same thing in the transcripts gotten by Oliver Kirby. He was the NSA deputy director at the time. It said, quote, we got them in the zero, whatever that means. I guess like the circle line of sight for the plane or something. Can you see the flag? Yes, it's the U.S. It's the U.S. So they actually questioned orders, and then the ground control said, do it anyway.
From what I understand, the NSA analysts that back up your story claim they heard these things on the tape, and the NSA released those tapes, and those were actually the rescue helicopters that came later that were saying those things, saying, go on with the mission. Oh my God, this is an American ship. This was after the whole incident had already ended. So
no,
that's what I understand the official story is.
No, is that true? So Ryan, like the thing you're talking about, the audio.
No, it's not. I don't think he's lying. I think he's just confused. There were tapes released by the NSA online, all of them coming after the attack. So like nothing during the attack. They have these, but the tapes are labeled like A002, A004, and where's A001 and 3? There's not an order, and there's blank spots, and they did a transcript in the Jerusalem Post, but then everybody who had seen the ticker tape and stuff immediately said that this is not correct. They're not putting all the information out. So that, I mean, this was translated and heard live by all those people I just named, and the only one I talked about in the NSA is Oliver Kirby. Other people were different organizations, and I can write all these out for you if you want to look up the names. The Chicago Tribune did an article about it in 2007, but now the title escapes me. But if you did Chicago Tribune 2007 at USS Liberty, I'm sure you can find it and see all the eyewitnesses. And you know, the Signal Intelligence was also released about it, and they also shot up the life rafts, which is a war crime anyway. And the survivor, Lord Painter, talked about that, machine gunning the rafts, and it's because there were torpedo boats as well. It wasn't just the aircraft. And the head aircraft commander actually later in his career was reprimanded, I believe fired, because he refused to bomb Gaza. He wouldn't do it. His name is Yitzhak something, but right. I haven't looked at the Liberty in a long time, so I don't have this on the top of my head. I'm not as autistic
then, I mean,
as people think.
But someone sent me this. That's why I shared it. I'm just curious. Then, how would you explain this, which was released by the government?
Can you explain to us?
Can you see it?
Yeah, but
it only comes up when you're talking, so you'd have to be like,
I'll feature him. There you go. But you
so it can.
I'll just look at it afterward and tell you what it is.
It says secret spoke, and it's a released document that says very clearly it's an Egyptian supply ship. For your info, it's apparently an Arab ship. Visual contact with both of you. Understand, attack, affirmative. No, I'm sorry. Take the people to Al Arish afterwards. Roger, okay. It doesn't say attack. It says visual contact. Understand the two of you are there. It's heavily redacted, but it seems to back up the idea that it was an accident, that they believed it was an Arab ship.
No, that document's correct. I've seen that before. When they were approaching the Liberty, I forget how many miles out or whatever, that's what they assumed, is that there could be an Egyptian ship off the coast of something. I'd have to look at this again. I haven't looked at Liberty in a while, but they knew when they were there. They saw the markings, they saw the flags, and they sat there and attacked it for long enough to know that it was an American ship and questioned orders. And then, of course, they said, sink it, complete the job. And, of course, they didn't sink it. And then the survivors had gag orders. And then Johnson wanted none of it. He didn't want to embarrass an ally. But if you really look at Johnson's history, ZOA, etc., and then letting them make steel nukes, and a larger picture of Lyndon Johnson, he was definitely in Israel's pocket. He was sleeping. His mistress was an Irgun terrorist, Matilda Krim. There's neighbors down there in Texas, and he was fucking her. That's what he was doing on the outbreak of the 6-Day War. I talked to Jeff Gates, who was in the war room at the time, and you know, Lyndon Johnson was literally held by the short hairs by Irgun, which is not like Israel proper. Irgun and Stern definitely terrorist gangs that And a lot of them ended up becoming part of the Israeli government, though. I mean, several prime ministers were involved with the bombing of the Patria. Moshe Sharet and Menachem Begin were all part of Irgun Haganah and actually gave the orders to Munya Manor, who's the person who brought the bomb aboard the ship that they blew up. It wasn't the only ship. I mean, they blew up lots of ships and trains, and they blew up the British Embassy in Rome, and blew up the King David Hotel and killed 92 people. I mean, they were terrorists. But these people, it's not like a few bad apples, because you end up with the first, the second, and the sixth prime minister of Israel all come out of this group. And even as early as 1948, you have people, a lot of prominent Jews, writing letters to the New York Times, including Albert Einstein, decrying Menachem Begin as a terrorist, and the Likud party, which he ended up creating, compared them to the same fascist of fascist Italy and Nazi Germany, that they were doing and represented the same things and preaching one thing and doing another. And yet this becomes the acting government of Israel. And I mean, there's no justification for some of the things they did. And I hate people getting into pissing contests. Oh, they killed this baby and then they killed this family. And murder is illegal and wrong. It's fucked up to shoot up civilians. It's fucked up to shoot a boat when we realize, oops, this is the wrong country. And but Johnson covered it up. And I'll leave you show notes if you want to see all those people I named. And I also recommend the Chicago Tribune. It was all the way back in 1967, but it goes kind of part and parcel with what happened in that war anyway, because Israel claims Egypt was amassing on its border. And so they had to strike first. But it'd been weird for Egypt to do that when they're already embroiled fighting a war in Yemen against the Saudis, which is now referred to as Egypt Vietnam. It was an absolute disaster. They were getting wrecked. And they were out of there in 68. So in 67 was at their most losing point. They're not going to open up a new front with Israel, although Israel had shot down Syrian planes and they had a defense pact. But all that starts, and Israel did preemptively strike with a justification as well. They're amassing on our border. But according to people in the war room, that war was planned out. And Andrew Coburn and other journalists have flushed this out completely. Like, that was definitely a planned attack, and Israel knew when the traffic would be heaviest in Cairo and took out the Egyptian Air Force while it was on the ground. And they had green lights in France and Britain. I mean, they had joined them in the 1956 war against Egypt, where the French and Israelis worked together for the buffer of the Suez. And that one was kicked off from an attempted false flag with the Lavon affair, which I don't like calling the Lavon affair, because Pinhas Lavon was actually innocent. He was the defense minister of Israel, the equivalent of like Secretary of Defense. He was actually the fall guy. Benjamin Gavili is the one that actually orchestrated it. And it all unraveled because one of the bombers, they're going around bombing Western targets and blaming it on Egyptians. And this man named Philip Nathanson, his bomb went off prematurely in his jacket. And so they searched his house, and the paper trail just went right back to the Israelis. And so there was a little bit hush-hush, and that court case kind of got bottlenecked. But the result was UN peacekeeping forces were going to be there for 10 years. Eisenhower supported this. So from 57 to 67, they were there. And weeks after they got removed, Israel attacked Egypt. And they've just been waiting to do it.
Removed. The Egyptian president expelled them 10 days before the war and sent his troops in to arm Sharm el-Sheikh and started saying that he was going to do it. And to use the excuse, but they were already in a war, that's how dictators cover up the fact that they're losing a war, is they start another one that's more popular. So the idea that's been done over and over and again through history. So the idea that the Egyptians wouldn't do it because they were losing a war is nuts. And they were armed so heavily by the Russians at the time, there was no danger that they were going to run out of stuff. Israel's stuff was far superior, far inferior to what Egypt had at the time. And the preemptive strike was declared as soon as he said, I'm closing the Straits of Tiran. Israel warned them this was casus belli. This was a cause for war. And they just didn't give a shit and just went through it anyway. And I mean, Jordan, they didn't even come until 3 days later. Israel begged them, don't come into this war. And they did it anyway. And then they lost the West Bank. So
closing the Straits was the reaction because they were supposed to leave the Sinai Peninsula when the UN peacekeeping forces left. And they were there, scheduled 10 years, gonna go. And the Israelis didn't leave. and so he was threatening to close the strait as an economic maneuver. But they didn't want a war with Israel, and Israel preemptively struck. Like I said, I talked to Jeff Gates, who did the pension funds for a lot of the military and different groups in the United States. Brilliant man. He was there, and I'm talking to the highest Israeli officials. You have an hour-long interview with him about it. And he's written a book, I think, called Jeff Gates. Anyway, look him up on Amazon. But when the alarms are going off, he's saying, shouldn't we leave? Should we go underground? Should we need to react here? And they just kind of casually looking at their watch and smile, and he knew right then that they had preemptively struck. Like, look at the time. No, we don't need to go anywhere. Egypt's not attacking us. We're attacking them. They had planned it out. And you need to read like Patrick Coburn and these. There are many books on this, far more in depth than the crap on Wikipedia, whatever.
So we'll be heading toward the concluding statement. So if you guys have general thoughts that you'd like to share, now is the time. And I'm going to launch a few questions that we have from Super Chats. LM, $5 US says, Halsey, is there a pseudo-caste system of Jew like the Kohanim? Can you speak to the social stratification of the Jewish people?
The Kohanim were the high priests during the time of the temple. They still are acknowledged as such because their bloodline, it's a passed on thing. So, but I don't see them as having any benefit of being a Kohen. I mean, in fact, it's fairly restrictive. They can only marry a virgin. They can only marry. If they divorce, they can only marry a divorcee. I mean, the only benefit they get to it right now is that there's like part of a temple service where they get to go up for 5 minutes and say a blessing for everybody. So I don't understand the example as being a social structure.
I don't know enough about it to comment. So CNA Fish 5 pounds says, can you ask Ryan Dawson why he uses pictures of Chinese models that you can find on Google and claim they are his Japanese wife on Twitter? Ryan, is this allegation true?
I have never posted a picture of my wife on Twitter. I don't put pictures of my family anywhere.
Okay, I would have been surprised if you had made that claim.
I think somebody was talking about waifu, like WAIFU, like
yeah.
I thought I had seen that too. Didn't you put that on your Facebook? Maybe you didn't use a picture of your actual wife. I don't blame you. Like I wouldn't put personal shit like that online either.
No, it was somebody say I was fucking with people, and I said something like, all you alt-right people are talking about your waifu and they have their like obsession with anime or whatever. And I'm like, I moved to Japan and really got married or whatever.
Wait, can I comment on that real fast? I'll get some major props in some of my Discord servers if I say, can we talk about anime? Even though I know nothing about it, you could say no, which is fine. But if I brought it up, they said that they would give me props. So I'm bringing it up.
You watch hentai?
I know nothing about anime. Like seriously, I really don't.
Would you be willing to watch hentai?
Probably. I don't really watch TV, to be honest with you. I think I've watched maybe 3 shows in the last 6 months.
I'll send you some amazing hentai. Like it's honestly,
go for it. I'll check it. Check it out. I just don't know what it is. Yeah. So, and if you're talking about like tentacle porn or something, just to like kind of fuck with me.
But that's way too. No. Have you ever seen something called Bible Black?
No. I've never seen.
It's right up your alley, man. Right up your alley. Have you ever heard of Futa?
Nope.
Oh, dude.
Honestly,
I'm gonna blow your mind tonight.
Yeah, I have a feeling with the way JF's laughing that I'm not going to watch it.
We should ask for Kurt's recommendation. I think I'll call Mr. Kerr and I'll ask him to zoom in on what Kurt was watching when he got found to be a big hentai porn fan.
Oh, is that tentacle porn stuff?
No,
like honestly,
yeah.
Well, Bible Black is and Futa porn. Okay, hentai means it's anime porn, and Futa is the one where the girls have dicks that come out of their vaginas like at some point, and then they bang other chicks.
Yeah, I definitely don't want to watch that.
So give it a chance. Maybe you'll like it.
Nah, man, not my thing.
Right, fair enough.
I want to say something. There is just because this pisses me off. There's a type of guy, like a type of gaijin foreigner that comes to Japan that's totally obsessed with that genre, hentai and fu, whatever it was, thing. And they're an embarrassment. Like fine, you like porn, whatever, you like cartoon porn, okay, but they kind of misrepresent foreigners. It doesn't matter. Like if you're Canadian, European, whatever, you're all American, then a lot of Japanese people's eyes. And so it makes us look like we're all a bunch of perverts that come to Japan and looking for alien rape or whatever. And I don't get it.
Yeah,
Alright, so we
a
have
lot
Black
of that shit is
State.
fucked up. A lot of that stuff is really messed up. I mean,
We have Black State, $20 US, and on the question of hentai, I hate
as a
hentai
libertarian, I would say, look, you can, if you want to jerk off to cartoons, like
yeah,
more power to you.
yeah. I don't kink shame. I used to like it when I was younger, when I was into like anime, but now it doesn't do anything to me. I might as well just be staring at a pencil trying to jerk off. Go ahead, JF.
Yeah, personally, I don't like drawings, but I do like the Asian female. Black State, $20 US. Cyrus Scofield was commissioned by Jews to make a reference Bible published in 1909 in favor of Zionism to garner American evangelical/Christian support. Although successful, this support was born under complete falsehoods.
I can't talk to it because I don't know what you're talking about.
All right. Now, going toward concluding statements, it seems that you guys have a very subtle view of reality, and some people may look at the debate and say, well, there was no blood, but that's what happened when you have intelligent people discussing in good faith. And personally, I learned a lot from the discussion, but I'd like to hear you guys about the future, because we've been talking about the past a lot. How do you see the future, knowing that there are these ethnic groups, these ethnic interests, and there are clashes in the past and there will be in the future? What would be your ideal view of the world going forward?
Is this our closing statement, or is this a topic of discussion?
No, we can just initiate this and then we can prepare last statements after.
I mean, I'll start in that. Remember when you first approached me about debating Ryan? I was pretty much against it, and it had nothing to do with Ryan. I honestly barely knew who he was. I had to kind of look into it a little bit. I just didn't see a debate about a country to be of value, like to me or to the audience, to tell you the truth. Because regardless of what we debate or whether someone wins or whether there's blood, it's not going to change absolutely anything. It's not going to change any kind of opinions on really how you feel about another country, really. But when I really got into it was I wanted to show the audience, and I wanted to show the people that we've talked to on this show, that this is the future of white nationalism. It's not easy. When you decide that you're going to create a state of your people, the entire world, and especially the UN, who Ryan keeps bringing up, will come crushing down on you like a fist. And it's not just because they're Jews. Okay, because the South Africans are dealing with the same bullshit, and it would be the same thing if they established an ethno-state here, which is why when I was debating Enoch, I kept saying, you have to do something. You have to start this. You have to go out and either raise big white families and start by increasing the population, buy land, give it away to other like-minded individuals. If you really believe that you want to build an ethno-state, which, as I said, I have no problem with, you have to understand the entire weight of the world will come down on you because they don't like grouping people like this. And the more I looked into what Ryan's videos say, the more I realized that is a very strong point of disagreement that we have. He's made videos where he says low IQ has nothing to do with the way Africa is. And
no, not nothing.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to mischaracterize what you're saying. I'm saying that you've said that it's less relevant than the idea of economic policy. Okay, and I don't agree with you. I just don't, because for the 185,000 years that the black nations in Africa were around before white people even existed, there's still no Wakanda. So I don't understand how, you know. So I just wanted. I thought.
Halsey, are you / our guy?
Yeah. If that means that like you're equating me with Matt R. Semite, then just no. Use some other label, please. I'll stick with Fat Boomer Kike if it means that I don't have.
All right, / Fat Boomer Kike.
I'm fine with that. So,
I love Halsey.
But at the same time, this is why I thought this debate would be worth it, and this is why I thought that it would be something that I wanted to participate in, because I like seeing the idea of people protecting their own and being with their own. And I like to point out why the JQ as it stands distracts from this. Because if you're not building, you're just looking to destroy others or looking to point out problems. I don't see how you accomplish your goals, especially when this is what will be allied against you. So that's my spiel.
And Ryan, what do you see for the future? What would be your ideal world, and how do we solve some of the issues we've been discussing in terms of violence internationally?
Well, the near future, I think this coming Friday, you're going to see more protests and probably more violence. And I don't, as far as the Palestinian front goes, I don't see a shining future there. There's a BDS movement or a boycott, divestment, and sanctions, but I'm on other fronts though. What Trump is doing, if he really does pull out of Syria, and if he will actually talk to Kim Jong-un in North Korea and scale back our military misadventurism and put America first, that would be good for the United States. I disagree with racial teleology. I think it's fine to come together on a national interest, on a cultural basis, on an ideological basis. Like, I don't think being Republican has an ethnic component. Anyone can be Republican. Anyone can be a Democrat too. It doesn't mean you have. It's not because of your genes. It's because of your ideology. And I see no problem with myself of being mixed races, or my children who are half Asian, living in the United States and being American and upholding American values and sharing the same culture. I don't see why it has to be exclusively a particular ethnic category. I think there's not good grounds to say that genetics are the reason for a particular culture. That said, I'm also vehemently against illegal immigration, and I don't agree with importing the third world. The video that I think Halsey is referring to, where I was talking about IQ, is me responding to the comments, because I made this very very long and nuanced spiel about neocolonialism, also talking about blacks murdering whites in South Africa and blacks murdering each other and black on black crime and all the domestic corruption on top of external, IMF predatory loans and things. All of those things are true. Only a basic bitch has it's got to be A or B. You either got to blame it all on the Africans, or you blame it all on colonists, or you blame it all. It's all of those things. And there are racial differences in IQ on average, but I think that's dead last as far as a factor in why things are so fucked up. I mean, you can find North and South Korea with the exact same race, exact same language, and only a couple generations apart, seriously, in genetics since 1952. And one's a complete shithole and the other isn't, because what is most, what's going to lead to success or not isn't your IQ. People in Mongolia have a high IQ. People in North Korea have a high. It's your economic policies. Free markets work. Communism doesn't. Dictatorships don't. Theocracy doesn't. And there are different places in the world that have remained stagnant from a technological perspective, and including Europe for a long time. And things change as markets change. When you get free trade and shipping and sailing, then that led to physics and so on, and things progress incrementally at first, and then they go very rapidly. You can advance. Japan's a good example. Singapore is a good example. Places can go from backward to advance by switching their economic system, and they can do the reverse. Have you seen in the Soviet Union and many communist nations that were prosperous and became shitholes because of their ideology, even though they had the same ethnic makeup? So I don't care about a future for creating specific ethnostates. I do care about cultural and ethnic groups surviving, though. I don't think that they should be flooded with England's becoming little Pakistan. But I have to blame that on their policies. If you don't want ants, then don't put sugar on the floor. You don't have to build a wall. You have to stop giving welfare handouts and incentives to get the third world to migrate to your country. But Democrats like to do that, to create a large voting bloc for themselves, to perpetuate the handouts. But you're not helping people by giving them handouts. You're doing the opposite. The long-term effect of welfare is removing agency and creating dependence. It's like spoiling a child. And I don't agree with affirmative action. I would agree with the alt-right on a lot of things, but for completely different reasons than this, race or something. I just see it as
I take
policy, and that's
issue
my
with
opinion.
I take issue with two things you say. First, there is a denial of the contribution of genes to political preferences and political behavior and social behavior, including cultural transmission. Uh, are you informed of that on that question at all? Because
I
we
think there's
know
a
that
denial because I'm not denying that there's influence from genes. There's influence within a race based on your IQ, and all of that's true. I'm just saying that is nowhere near as large of a factor as specific economic policies. Any race can fail, as whether you're, North Korean Asians, Cuban, Latin Americans, Venezuelans, Russians. If you have communism, it doesn't matter how smart you are, because
But
the economic system of free markets predicates everything else.
even putting the question of race aside, you said any race can fail. I would certainly agree. I can take a race that would be known as very successful on average. I can raise them in a cage, not feed them, and they're going to be poor adults. They're going to be adults who have developmental issues. But I would ask the invert question. Do you think that any individual can succeed? Do you think that everyone on earth has the potential, the genetic potential to succeed in the right context? Or are there people who are not who cannot be saved from themselves?
There are people who cannot be saved, and there are people who will succeed, but I don't think it's broken down by racial lines so neatly. I think within any race, you're going to have people who can succeed and people who can't. But if you have already in place for geopolitical reasons, for environmental reasons, for anything could happen. You could have a successful society and boom, Black Plague, and then they got to start over. Like, there are a lot of other factors that cause reset buttons, wars, etc., that can take a very successful culture like what happened in Crete, and then it's out. Like, there are different reasons for these things. But if you already have one dominant culture with superior technology, etc., then the others that are lagging behind probably aren't going to surpass them if globalization has reached a point where they're going to say, hey, you're not catching up with us, and maintains the status quo, which is, in their interest, they believe.
That's one thing that sort of goes against what you're saying right now. You're talking about economic factors in certain countries. That's what affects like how good it's doing. But when we look at America here, that's doing well, and a lot of races are doing well. Why do Black people have higher crime rates? Lower education scores, aren't doing as well as other races, even though they're living in what's quote unquote a successful economic country.
Yeah, blacks are not even doing as well as blacks were doing themselves in the past, and they'll use the excuse of the institution of slavery. And I disagree. I agree with Thomas Sowell on this one. 95% of blacks vote Democrat. They're liberal. And there's just fostered this attitude of entitlement, which is not conducive to success. Other immigrants like the Irish, which people call the N-word of Europe, that lived in worse conditions than many places in Africa for a very long time, after a generation or two were very successful in the United States. And they had the same genes, but they didn't have the same opportunities in Ireland that they had in the United States. But blacks are not taking advantage of these opportunities by and large. When Jews who began in ghettos in New York and New Jersey, they landed and they went to the libraries and they went and utilized all the resources that were around them. Blacks did not do that. They're coming from a culture of entitlement, and same with Puerto Ricans. There's certain cultures that fail and certain cultural attitudes that don't. Different Asian groups that value, like the Protestant work ethic, but they're not Protestant, but they value hard work and studying and saving. Those three things, if you'll do those three things, your group as a whole will succeed. And the Chinese, they worked their asses off. They built the railroads. They were essentially slaves as well. And it depends on which part of China, though. There are certain places in America and Chinatown with piss poor Chinese people, other places where they're buying up all the real estate. It depends on parenting. It depends on the cultural attitudes. And blacks in the United States do not have a positive cultural attitude. And a lot of this is from media. And yes, you can't just say slavery didn't matter, but other
But it's
groups
not
have
just in
succeeded
America,
in less
though,
amount
is
of
it?
time.
It's not just in America, isn't it? All over the
No,
world.
it isn't. It's not all. I don't know. I can't say if it's all over the world, but it's definitely
I'd
at
say
least in
like
the United
areas
States.
in Nigeria, there are rich black people, but pretty much everywhere else where black people try to start, you know, economic.
I mean, the IQ measures of all black nations is lower than all white
Sure.
nations. This is a
Arab
truth
nations as well.
around the world. And the issue I take with your perspective is you have some of the keys, Ryan, when you say we don't want a system that encourages welfare. That's true. But when you start thinking about stuff intergenerationally, you understand that it's not a little change of culture that will undo a wave of genes coming from the past. When you reward welfare, what you're doing is you're helping people on welfare make more baby, and the next generation, what you have is more people who are apt at only doing welfare. And it doesn't matter if they're apt because they have a certain cultural belief or they're inapt because of A, B, C in their environment. The reality is that you've favored the genes that encourage the existence of that very parental environment. And when you understand
worse
things
than that.
in this way,
It's worse than that because welfare, this contributes to crime too, because there's a disproportionate amount of crime from, let's say, blacks in the United States versus whites in the United States. Some of that you can explain by, well, blacks almost exclusively live in urban centers, and urban centers is where violent crime happens. And so the percentages aren't as widespread because the white average is going to be offset by all the people that live in rural America that have almost a zero in crime rate. But if you look at urban versus urban, the numbers are much closer, but there's still a higher percentage. And I think a lot of that comes from single parent families, and welfare has exacerbated the loss of the father. And a father, provides a lot more than just an income. A father is necessary on things that you can't measure monetarily, but the welfare system has incentivized baby mamas, or whatever you want to say, to kick the father out and replace him with government. The government's not a good daddy, and these kids are running around without fathers, and turn to crime, and they're not getting the instruction they need in parenting. And it undermines the nuclear family. And this has been part of the Frankfurt School to, encourage feminism, to encourage the breakup of the nuclear family for all groups. But it's especially hard on groups that are on the bottom, and they're going to remain on the bottom. But I don't think it can be explained just by genes. And why wouldn't you want the top of the chain link with you? I mean, obviously, if there are the rich
Ryan,
stuff, why not have to be in America?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I agree with you on the welfare thing. Definitely, it incentivizes people to have single parent households, etc. But when we look at the averages of a poor white neighborhood compared to a poor black neighborhood that uses welfare equally, there is still more crime and violence and just chaos basically in the black neighborhoods. Hashtag not all black people. I'm sure there are many black people out there who can rise above that. I'm not saying all, but don't you see, like, is it just a coincidence?
But see, there wasn't
but you're also,
before the welfare
Andy,
state.
but real quick, Andy, you're bringing up a point that was just published by the New York Times. Of course, they tried to spin it, but people that are black children that are brought up in extremely wealthy families still have the same rate of incarceration, the males do, as black people brought up in relatively low, like extremely low
exactly. Yeah.
economic areas.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
And so, I mean, and this was pushed as proof of American racism, which is nonsense. But there has to be some, and it's funny because they opened the door to be questioned about race in general. But the idea that racism would keep people back, and yet these are the same factors you're seeing across economic lines, really does shoot you in the foot, Ryan, on this one.
No, I think the racism is towards whites, and it hurts blacks and whites. When you have something like affirmative action, one, it's not a merit-based system. You have merit within a category instead of just who deserves it the most. But you're also getting a lot of blacks, let's say, get into a university that they shouldn't have got into, and it's over their head. So maybe they could have gone to a good university, but they end up Cornell or something, or a high level of university, and they're bottom of their class and they drop out. And you just filled in the seat of somebody else who was probably more qualified. And the blacks that would have qualified anyway will always be sort of undermined because people will question, well, did you really deserve this, or were you just the best in your group? And so it's really a slap in the face and detrimental. But this out of control level of black on black crime didn't start like immediately after the slaves were free. They were doing better in the 50s and 60s than now. You didn't have, even when it was completely 100% black areas, when people were segregated by race and blacks lived in one spot and whites lived in the other, you didn't have all these drive-by shootings and baby mamas and all that stuff. This starts with welfare that destroyed the black families. And if it's genes, why would they be doing better in the past than they are now?
Why didn't welfare destroy the white family as it did the black
family? Welfare has destroyed white families, but like I said, because
at the rate
cultural
of
reasons,
at the rate of black families.
Yeah, because for white families on welfare, usually there's a stigma toward it, like, oh, you're on welfare, you poor ass white trash. There's a negative connotation for people collecting welfare, being lazy and couldn't get a job, and you're on welfare. And so whites who go on welfare, and I'm not talking about, you have a handicapped child or something like that, but like by and large, like people who are just on welfare, sucking off the teat. There's a stigma in the community against it, and they try to get off welfare. A lot of whites will work 3 or 4 shitty jobs instead, rather than going on welfare. But for a lot of blacks, they have this entitlement attitude because we was slaves, that they say, well, you owe me. So there's no stigma to collect welfare. So they're willing, like, I'm going to get my shit, that kind of thing. I'm going to go get my welfare. I'm going to go do this, and I deserve it. And I don't need to be looking for 3 or 4 jobs because they owe me because slavery. And so that attitude actually exacerbates the problem. It's just their fault and welfare's fault. I'm not saying
but can I bring up? No, go ahead. Keep going.
Oh, I was just gonna say that. If we look at percentages of people on welfare, not per capita, just the people on welfare, there's many white people who are on welfare. Why aren't white people causing crime from the stigma of welfare like black people? 55% of the crimes in America are caused by 13 or even less percentage of the population. If we're talking about young black males, about
violent crimes,
the reason why
murder, rape, all that stuff. But that you're saying it's the welfare stigma, but we have more white people on welfare, not per capita, and the crime isn't being caused by white people. So the stigma of welfare can't really be correlated with violence, in my opinion.
The reason why, Andy, and this is where I will jump in, is
this is why or something.
this is why during the Holocaust or during the rise of Hitler, you didn't see Jewish people strapping bombs to their chest and running in and killing babies. And that's why you do see it in certain areas, and you still don't see it in areas of intense suffering elsewhere. These things do matter. And there's a reason why we don't excuse it when we see it. There's a reason why we don't say, well, the Palestinians have suffered so immensely, therefore they just are left with no choice but to strap bombs onto themselves and blow up pizzerias. Okay? Because you would have seen it throughout history in oppressed people everywhere. You would have seen that every time there was an oppressed people, they would have acted in this manner, and it could be documented as being repeatable. But it's not. It's only repeatable among the 2 societies that are documented as having very low IQ and having ideologies that are incompatible with society. So, as I said, if you're looking at these 2 things and you're trying to prove that these 2 things are real, all you have to do is look at the issue of Israel and Palestine. And JF, this is something that I've been trying to say for a while, and I haven't been able to because there was just this long diatribe back and forth. When we first talked, you didn't know me, I didn't know you. And you said to me, what is your issue with people like Mike Enoch and people like Richard Spencer and people like all of that? And I told you they were frauds. And you asked me, why are they frauds? And I gave you some example, but I said it's a lot more nuanced. And this is the point that I'm making. If you really want to build an ethno-state, you go out and you do it. You don't sit around and bitch about all of the different evil enemies out there who won't give you what you want. You go out and do it. And the fact that Mike Enoch and Richard Spencer are not drooling retards means that they know that. Come on, you can't be that stupid to think that somewhere out of nowhere that in America, Trump's going to sign a declaration saying all white people can have all of America and we're going to boot out anyone we don't like. I want to live next to a white ethno-state. I think it would be a benefit. I think Ryan's children would probably do pretty well living right next to mine. You know?
May I add one thing? Yeah, like, right. I'm not trying to like dogpile you or anything.
My kids wouldn't be white though, so they wouldn't be in the white ethno state.
Neither would mine.
I'm just saying.
And neither would I.
Neither would I.
In my opinion, what I'm bringing up right now is just very apparent. You're saying it's from the stigma from, you know, freaking welfare, but I mean, when we look at stats at the full, look at that. Go ahead. Sorry.
I think you guys like the alt-right and people with that want to bring up IQ.
I'm not alt-right. I'm not alt-right.
I'm okay. You're not alt-right, but they also bring up IQ a lot and genetic determinism a lot. And this is a topic that you're not allowed to talk about, because if the conclusions aren't PC, then you're just not allowed to have those conclusions. And any kind of work that would show that, well, look, you know, based on genetics, like this group's always going to fail or something, they would not be allowed to present that conclusion even. I don't negate that IQ is a factor. And I'm not saying welfare is the factor. I'm saying there are many factors. And the video that I was going over about economic policy, about you know, welfare, affirmative action, specific policies that you can do something about. Like, you can't just change genetics quickly, and you can't just like look at someone and know, well, you're a smart black person, you're a dumb one, you're a smart white. Like, it's not gonna be like a test or something. But you could stop affirmative action. You can stop third world immigration. There's a policies you can change. So as a pragmatist, because I think ethnostate is LARPing to the nth degree, and I don't agree with it, but you can change these liberal policies and undo that damage, and then you can work on, well, what can we do if you believe it's an IQ problem?
I agree with you completely on that point. However, I'm not going to close my eyes to the information that I was just saying to you as well. I mean, some people make it the base of their point, which obviously is like, okay, dude, we have to look further into it. But so I understand your point there. Some people just talk about the IQ and just the race and make it only about the identity politics. However, it doesn't mean that doesn't exist. We have to look at the overall picture. Sure. That's all I'm saying.
I also don't know why we're not talking about the pink elephant in the room. Ryan lives in an ethno state that has a very generous social welfare program. And you don't see this problem of people that are lower IQ creating Detroit. So, and I'm not
welfare program.
Do you have socialized medicine?
Well, healthcare is paid for by taxes, which means you'd have to have a job and pay taxes, or you're not allowed in.
Not stupid. We all know that it comes from taxes. I'm saying you have a socialized medicine program.
What I'm saying is you don't get to participate in it unless you're working.
You don't get to participate in it unless you're working?
If you're not working and you're not paying the tax, you don't get it. Well, your family can, yes.
So I'm saying
somebody in the household has to be working.
In where you live, that is not necessarily true. Israel is also the same thing. They have a very generous social welfare program amongst their society, paid for by taxes, all the above. And I'm saying there is not this problem of, you know, Detroit. There's a problem.
Healthcare is not the same thing as just welfare, like getting money from the state because you don't have a job. You know, you get in Japan, they have a workfare system where if you don't have a job and you really need welfare and you're a Japanese citizen and all this other criteria, you have a limited amount of time to go to like Harawak, what they call it. And what they do is they give you a bullshit job where you go to the train station, you hand out tissue paper or something like that. They have little advertisements on them. And that way you're doing something. And so you can get your money, but you don't get to keep your leisure time. Because a problem with welfare in the United States is like, well, why should I work a minimum wage job when I can make the same amount of money doing nothing and collect welfare? Well, they don't.
But Andy just said like 5 times, then why haven't we seen the same problem amongst white communities that are large welfare recipients? The South has a big percentage of white welfare recipients, and you don't see the same breakdown of the family or of the society that you see in Detroit or in LA.
Well, Detroit, I think, was ransacked by the unions. There's very specific reasons for different regions. You do see a lot of problems in trailer parks and methane and amphetamine addicts and people going to prison and beating their wives and all the rest of shit, and heavily in areas with lots of welfare among whites, among whoever. But in urban areas, you get special cases. That's where a lot of money is. And it'd take me a while to explain what happened in Detroit, but I'm telling you, a lot of it was liberal policies wrecked that city, especially with the unions and the car companies. And that's something Trump is correcting with deregulation and fighting over, competitive trade with China. These kind of things matter. Healthcare matters too. You can't compete with Japanese car manufacturers when all of your workers have to pay their own healthcare, or the plant has to pay for their employees' healthcare. Where in Japan, it's from the tax system, and the total cost is down because you don't have in America, you're not allowed to even negotiate the price down of Medicare and Medicaid. And so they're like, well, what the government's going to pay? We'll just charge whatever we want. You can get an X-rays like $400 or something, even with insurance. In Japan, an X-ray would be about $20. So it doesn't matter if you paid out of pocket, if the state paid, or some partial thing, or your employer paid, because it's only $20. The problem with American healthcare isn't that, how much ratio comes from your employer or out of your pocket or from Medicare or whatever. It's the price, and the prices are high because there's monopolistic regulation that ensures, and this is from drug companies, insurance companies, etc., that there won't be market competition, that they can't bring the price down. The total price for procedures and surgeries, etc., and drugs, and they won't allow generics. That is why it's so expensive. You could have the system America had in the 50s, a free market system, and people could pay for it. You don't have to have socialized medicine as the answer. It's better than what America has now, but it isn't the best answer. That's another topic.
I still take issue with a lot of the social explanation, and it's not because I think it's false. I think it's true that there are social policies that have destroyed families. There are social policies that have favored monopolistic control over industries and that have raised the costs. This is all true. To me, it's just an incomplete explanation until you understand that the proper description of America right now and for the last 8 decades is that we've allowed women to vote. They've voted. They've took the country toward the leftist direction, and we've allowed minorities to vote, and they've taken the countries also toward the left. And what we are currently creating out of America, which used to be a country of liberty, we are creating a farm of leftists. And when you say social policies have destroyed the family, yes, but who was voting for these social policies? The fact is that families have destroyed themselves.
A lot of the leftist philosophy was pumped into American minds through the media. And it's like Hollywood and all these things. These are propaganda outfits. It's not just like purely for entertainment, movies, TV
even
shows,
then, what
MTV,
we would have
etc.
farmed in America, even if we get to this explanation, we would have farmed into America people who were not able to decide for themselves and who trusted Hollywood. The fact is, when we rebuild a society and when we decide in this world that we want a society that is free, it's gonna have to leave some people behind. Some people we've farmed in our current system. That's the fact, and their genes are going to be something we need to consider.
I don't agree with expelling people based on race. If people fail, they fail as individuals, and if it happens to be mostly one race or another, then so be it. But you can't categorically just throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, all of you who look like this are fucked, because on average, you do worse than this other group.
I'm not talking about fucking them or expelling them. I'm saying once we rebuild a society somewhere, we'll have to leave them behind, leave them to their own devices, and leave them to be the payers of the price that they have to undergo by wanting the societies that they want.
You're already seeing it now in Detroit. You're seeing it now in LA. You're seeing that what happens is you have white flight. You have all of the industry leaves because they're just not willing to sit there and take this kind of bullshit from a society that then looks at them and demands more.
Well, the companies in Detroit also didn't want to give up 50% of their paycheck and have all these union employees that they had to pay and all these high taxes either. It destroyed the car industry. And without that, you don't have jobs and employment. You end up with a bunch of leeches. You're going to have flight of whatever.
I want to read one a comment in the chat. Aaron said, why do we see them in the same thing in the UK, given that the UK has a totally different media landscape?
Huh? I don't understand what you just said.
I think that was for Ryan.
Okay.
About bringing up the thing in the media.
Sorry, I'm falling asleep.
Yeah, no worries. I know. Do you want to
Would you like to do a
to
show
conclusions
on ethnostates and race, and I can bring the perspective of all the other factors besides
That's
IQ,
good.
which I
Yeah.
do not.
Y'all can
I
do
don't
that.
discount IQ. I just think like
yeah, we weren't ready for.
why don't you talk about all these other things that are definitely like demonstratively, not speculative. Like this is screwing things up, this policy, that, and go through why what's detrimental to your society or not.
Sure.
But in preparation for that debate, Ryan, keep a note that you keep getting back to IQ. Have you heard me mention IQ much? No. I'm saying that there are genes that favor certain behaviors. Some of these behaviors relate to IQ and relate to performance in the workplace, but some of these behaviors also relate to political preferences, and they relate to the fact that societies that have these genes in will be headed toward a certain direction.
I see the political pendulum swing back and forth even within the same populations. So it's hard for me to believe that the genes are kind of a disposition toward a certain political ideology when things swing left and right and all over depending on what's happening. And it's not like the genes had time to change that quickly when you're talking about just a generation or something. So no, you
may
weren't
have the
talking about
illusion that we are oscillating between the left and the right. That's what happens at the party level. But if you look over the last 100 years, America is straight toward the left, straight headed toward the left, independently from parties, because the parties are moving with the genes.
I think we're currently moving toward the right. I think they've overplayed their hand, and this sort of SJW crybaby culture is about to have the pendulum swing way back the other direction. You've seen that in some European states too.
We have an industrialized system to kidnap children and put them in the hand of their mothers, assuming that the father is guilty of something, even if there's no proof for it. America has never been so socialized, and social justice warriors have never been so strong as they are today on planet Earth.
I agree, but I think that's why it's about to go the other way, because a lot of Trump supporters weren't just anti-Hillary. They were just sick of this, everyone calling everyone a racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic. Like they just invented new genders, right? That's going to have blowback. It always does. If you look at a broad historical perspective, something goes on top and peaks and bullies too much, and then the rug gets pulled out from under them. And what you said about fathers, I'm in full agreement. Like there's not a male privilege in the United States. It's the exact opposite. Females have a favored in court, favored by police, favored in school, definitely favored in custody. But that's another topic,
Yeah, let's talk about it later, but I do hope that the pendulum that you're talking about results in the formation of a white ethno-state based around liberty.
And before
I agree with you more. I look forward to living next to it.
Yeah. Before we continue, everyone, if you enjoyed, hit like, help support the channel. I also have Halsey and Ryan Dawson's links down there below, as well as my gaming channel as well, the Purple Dragon. I'll be streaming a bit later on that. Maybe. I'm like super sick. I'm like dying right now. I've been pounding this Dayquil like no one's business. But with that,
that's because you have poor sick genes, Andy.
No, my girlfriend got me sick. I haven't been sick in so long. I fucking knew it. Anyway, let's start with some final words. How about that?
Genes attracted you to your girlfriend who got you sick.
No ethno-state for your girlfriend.
No. So
wait, isn't your girlfriend a ginger?
No, yeah, she's Irish.
She's a daywalker?
Yeah, she's a daywalker.
See, they always come without warning.
Yeah.
My ginger bashing is a dog whistle to prove that I can say whatever I want about white people, whether it's Russians, Southerners, gingers, whatever, soul impaired, whatever you want to call them, and none of that'll get banned or censored. But like I said, I was defending Mark Twain's use of the N-word, saying not that I want to hear the N-word. I'm kind of indifferent about it. Like that's how it was in the 1800s. But the way he's using it and with his character was saying, first he's saying nigger and then he calls him Jim by his first name. And the character Huck Finn has this kind of epiphany where he's like, you know what? I I'm changing my mind about these things. They erased the N-word from Huck Finn books. And I was like, I was pissed off about it. I'm like, dude, it's Mark Twain. And actually, in this case, he's saying, yep, he starts as a racist from cultural and religious pressure, and then he changes his mind from these adventures and stuff. It's fucking Mark Twain. And so by mentioning the word, Facebook ban. But I guarantee you, I could get, if I get back on, I could write anti-redhead comments like all day long.
Yeah.
Nothing will happen.
But God
And
forbid
because
we say nigger
whites
Jim.
are not the privileged class. I mean, redheads are demon spawn, but I'm saying I could say that too. And that's not right.
Hashtag Ginger Lives Matter. Someone Booberly in the chat said. Let's do
They
final...
3/5 matter.
I want to do final thoughts. I will start with Halsey. What's going on, man?
Listen, this accomplished exactly what I hoped it would accomplish. This enabled me to talk about what I did. If you guys want to have another debate about this, I've got like 20 debates scheduled, so I don't think I can participate in another one like this. I'd rather get back to talking about kind of my more passionate issues.
Yeah.
So, but I would definitely watch it for sure if you guys have a debate on this kind of stuff.
Cool.
But I really thank you for the opportunity. And as I said, Jeff, sooner or later I would be able to make my point as to what I think about the frauds that are running some of these shows, and I'm just glad that I was able to do it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Halsey. And Ryan.
Yeah, I want to draw in my closing statement attention to a bill in Congress that has 21 co-sponsors already. It's HR 4391, and it's against the imprisonment of children and cutting off U.S. military aid for the purposes of incarcerating children. And so it could become bipartisan. It's introduced out of Minnesota, and so that's HR 4391. I'm not a geneticist or anything, and this debate sort of dovetailed into that topic at the end, but in respect to Israel and the history of the Liberty and NUMEC and their racial colonization of Palestinians and things, I think it's just morally repugnant and can't be justified. It's not good for Jews. It's not good for Palestinians. And if they want to have a solution, it needs to be a one-state solution. And they're going to have to give up this idea of having a demographic majority and base things around cultural national interest rather than what you look like.
And as I said, white nationalists, this is what you will be facing.
All righty. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. It was awesome.
Take care, guys.
Thank you. All right. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
All right. Peace.
See ya. Sorry about the mic fuck up.
Nah, it's all good,
No
dude.
problem.
It's new too.
Oops. All right. Let me just grab some tissue. I'm dying here. Oh my god, dude. But I survived. I made it. I got into a little tiff with Ryan there. People in the chat, thank you for backing me up. Hi, IQ Andy. The meme has survived. JF. Hang on, give me 1 sec here. In fact, now that we're on here, this works perfect because I can share the screen like this. So we are better in technical standings today. And
I don't see your screen. Are you okay? Cool.
There it is. But it's just me and you on the camera. Guys, I have to grab tissue. Be right back.
All right, so we have LM. I will not read the comment. DPI Chat certified, $4 US. Get Brendan O'Connell on. I don't know who that is. Saltwater, $5 says, Halsey, when you're lying in bed tonight asking yourself what just happened, remember this super chat. Juvenescence, $2 US. Fat Boomer Kag versus Loti Dawson joke. Thanks, guys.
By the way, Jeff.
Thank you for the
Jeff,
yep.
I spoke to AIU. I spoke to Nick Fuentes. And it's been slightly confirmed right now. I have to switch it over from the Monday to Tuesday because I know we're switching the schedules. Tuesday, 8 p.m. Doing it 8 p.m. because AIU lives in Australia. So it's his 8 a.m. or something. So Nick Fuentes versus AIU. And Friday, it's been confirmed. I was talking to David. You were talking to the other guys. David Charette, whoa, DM'd me. He DM'd me, and he wanted to call out a few people. So Friday, who do we have? David Charette, his buddy, and who were the other two? Oh, Alternative Hypothesis.
Alternative, yeah. And Sean last.
That's gonna be Friday.
So it will be great.
7 p.m.
Andy, I'm starting a new hashtag because you were the one criticizing me for bringing 3 debates a week. You had turned it down to 1 debate a week, and right now you're doing the bookings and you're booking 3 debates a week.
Well, you want to know why?
Why?
Because the Purple Dragon that I'm doing, the secondary channel, was a good place to blow off steam. Also, I'm sure you could tell. I mean, minus this debate, because I'm dying right now. Like I literally woke up with the worst sickness ever. I've been fucking intervening and just being like, I don't care. I'm gonna be part of the show. And when Ryan was like, "Oh, why are you dogpiling?" Sorry, buddy. You're here. I'm a host here. I'm not. If I hear some bullshit, I'm gonna talk. I'm gonna participate. I'm not gonna sit back.
And we should have intervened with the ethnostate ID earlier. I just didn't think about it. It could have put a lot of energy in the debate. Unfortunately, I thought about it at the end, so we brought it. That being said, I'm still starting a hashtag. Hashtag ND is JF's puppet, and he's doing everything JF wanted. And he is booking 3 debates a week, just like JF wanted.
I'm DMing. What did I say in my last DM to you, or the second last DM? I was just like, "Am I being lazy now, huh?" And you're just like, no. But I like the debate again. I needed a place to spurg and do my own stuff, which Purple Dragon has been fantastic. The amount of views there I'm very happy with, getting about 2,000 views per video only in the first week and going up. And so I needed a place to actually do that. And also me realizing, you know what? I want to join into these topics. I'll throw in the wrench if I have to. I don't care if I offend anyone. I've proved my IQ. I'm 110 IQ, and I can be part of these discussions. Okay.
Malcolm from the north, $10 Canadian. How long is Bloodsport, by the way? About 9 inches flaccid, sir. Juvenescence, $2 US. Heavily medicated. Warski does have an echo. John Michael Cornett, $5 US. I'm like this, been waiting for weeks. And again, he sends another $5 US. Blair, cut it off. You fashcock is turning me into a rock. Okopokoham. I think you're gonna have to read. It's getting blurry. While
sure,
you move.
Sure. By the way, is my mic's good, right?
Yep, very good.
All right, cool,
well,
cool.
here.
All right, John Michael Cornett, $5. Blair, cut it off. You fash cock is turning me into a rock. Hacklepoko Ham, £5. I've been waiting to see this since Ryan Dawson came on the first time. Pop TV, $3. Warski BTFO'd everyone on Twitter. Great shit. Glass half empty, $5. Dawson doesn't understand overall Jewish subversion throughout the centuries, and it's been going on for the millennia. You knuckle dragging LARPing intellectual. Good night, guy. $2. BYBS had me argue like this 3 weeks ago. Come on, Adam. Marcus Antonius, $5. Halsey is too dumb to breathe. So much for that Ashkenazi intellect. He talks trash to Anons, but uses a fake name. Real name is Herschel Goldstein. I think that's a troll. Joshua Larson, $2. Did Ballo take Halsey's spot for this debate? I don't know if that's true. Totally not a troll. 25 PLN. Halsey got jealous of Nick the Knife Fuentes. Nick the Knife Fuentes' nickname. Yep. Simon Scola, $2. I slowly began to hate them. The Burgundian, $2. JF, what's your opinion on Charles the Bold?
I don't know who that is, and don't read the next one.
Joshua Lawson, thing for the $5. Eric Coda, $5. Wrong. We sent 400 billion on the F-35. The overall lifetime cost is over 1 trillion, similar to the F-16. Kool-Aid at $5. Right now, Andy looks like that girl from Breaking Bad. Yeah, you read that one. Dying of a flu is not fun times. Broadster, what up, Broadster? ST, $5. The strategy the U.S. employed is irrelevant. They went to Iraq because of weapons like anthrax that they did not have. Connor de Boutelier, €5. JF, could you please say Sleepy Steve?
Sleepy Steve.
David W, $5. If Tamimis weren't colonizing Jewish land, she wouldn't be in prison now. Arab imperialists out of Israel. Joshua Larson, $2. Andy looks tired of these greater than 110s quibbling. Finn White, $2. Andy, Matt's garbage. I unpatron him. Be my friend. We are friends now. Simon Scola, $5. Why is? Oh yeah, he's on Monday. And Matt's mad at me. He DM'd me yesterday and he goes, "Okay, let's talk tomorrow." I'm like, "Cool." So on Kumite today, I'm like, "Hey, Matt wants to talk. That's cool." And then he went on Twitter and went, "Fuck Andy. I wanted to keep this private." When I was being really nice to him on Kumite, then he blocks me. Then he releases our DMs and goes, "Fuck Andy." When I was like, "Yeah, okay, yeah, cool." And I said on Kumite today, I respect Matt because he's the first one to DM me to discuss this drama that's been happening. And then I guess he must have heard from someone and thought I was making fun of him, which I didn't. And so, Matt, you are irrelevant and you will continue to be irrelevancy.
Poor Matt, he's live streaming takeoff and he doesn't know how to handle it.
Yeah, it's dummy. Can I not say, "Hey, I'm talking to someone today"? I didn't say anything else. Fucking retard. Class FMT, $5. Dawson is blue-pilled on race and its effect on group behavior. He should have debate with alt-hype or maybe someone else on such issue. He is lost. I agree on that. That's why I jumped in. Black-pilled Andy, motherfucker. Salt Watowa, $20. I read this. Thank you very much. Gabriel Lopez, $10. Thank you very much. I read that, even though you had a racial slur in there. Glass half empty, $2. Europeans. Lazar Razzle, $5. Even with a weak tone and quiet voice, I am far more convinced by Ryan so far. So much for blood sports. Oh, I read this one as well. Thank you very much. Glass half empty, $5. Dawson, I read this. Skilla Scola. I read this one too. Eric Coda, $10. Did you read this one? Palestine did ethnic genocide against native Jews over 1,000 years ago. That's true, right?
I don't know. Palestinians, they probably weren't called Palestinians, but maybe there was a population there.
John Michael Cornett, $5. When Halsey speaks of the Hashemites to show the inadequacy of an UN-resolution, I do find it convincing.
UN resolution.
What?
UN resolution, United Nations, and you said resolutions.
Oh shit! I forgot. I'm still on camera. I was like leaning back with my feet up. My feet aren't being seen here. Perfect. This is a perfect spot for me. All right. This is how I read it. I thought my feet were right in front of the camera. That would be fucking terrible. I did fuck up that word, but you know what? It's part of the meme. Do you want to read on?
Yeah, so we have Arocoda, $5 US. Ask Halsey if he would support Europe. Okay, that I asked. Broadster ST, $2 CA. You missed my last super chat. Sorry. We don't read all of them. It depends on how it integrates to the conversation. Glass FMT, $2 US. Jake. InfoWars, Stop the Purge, $2 US. I lost 14k subs from Purge. Plug my new channel. Well, you saw it. It's InfoWars, Stop the Purge. Juvenescence, $2 US. So when are you buying your plane ticket, Halsey? Medicated Misanthrope, $2 US. Thank you for the donation. Arocoda, $5 US. Does Halsey think that Native Americans should be given land to regrow their population? DWireBucks, $5 US. Halsey, you chose the wrong weapon. You need something with an icon so it can be spammed in the chat. Bows or hammers, perhaps. Rene Intariano, $2 US. We should build camps for the Jews with showers. No, that's not good. Arocoda, $2 US. Not a woman. Mitridat, 20 sec. JF is king. Devon, God King. PS. Arian. is best pony. That is true. Arakoda, $5 US. Eye for an eye is moral Ryan. The universe always balances out. Not Lex, $2 US. Stop fapping Andy. I did see that Andy was fapping during the thing, but he has a cough, so it's excusable. David W, $5 US.
make sure
Zoa and
hang on, I'll see one thing. I had this on for a bit. Let me see how this look. This was burning my eyes, dude. Look at the screen. That's the worst.
what is this?
It's like a strobe light. Like there's the flash.
Oh, okay.
And then there's the.
Because I see with lots of delay.
No, I meant on screen share. I have it on screen share.
Okay.
Anyway,
Yeah, but I see with lots of delay even in the screen share. I just wanted to
okay.
tell you.
Here, I'll read
So
on.
Zoa.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Where are we? Zoa? No, we're
Yep.
on. Oh, right here. Yeah. Dave W, $5. Zoa and APAC are totally different and unrelated organizations. Ryan, your ignorance is painful. LM, $5. So Democrat public officials support APAC to gain evangelical support. I mean, come on, dude. Darish Ashkenani, $5. Trump's trying to start a war with Iran. Fucking talk about this. Hot Perrier, $2. Ryan equals Native American Rachel Dalzell. Hi, heckin' love science, $5. What about the fact that Israel sold those missile systems to other countries for a profit when Americans paid for their development? John Michael Cornett, $10. I read this one, thank you. Baron Barbados, $5. Here's a question. Why is Israel-Palestine conflict this debated, but the conflict between Pakistan and India is a tree falling in a forest? Is that true? No one talks about that? About the conflict between Pakistan and India?
Yeah, I guess that it has less mediatic exposure.
Kyler, $2. I am bisexual. Lost Wingman 07, $2. Talking about the 7 nations in 5 years plan. John Michael Cornett, $5. According to a Bloomberg poll, almost 60% of evangelicals say that U.S. should support Israel, even if its interests diverge with American interests. Again, thank you to this huge donation from Brian W., $100. Love you. Salt with Toa, $20, who was telling Ryan to wake up. Thank you so much. We read that one as well. Edmund Ploppy, $2. Andy, this guy is putting himself to sleep. Valentin, $50. Again, we read this one. Thank you so much. We love those big donations. It really helps support the show. M is for murder, 50 Nuck. Hey, love the show. I just uploaded an animation of you. Oh, did you? Would love to see your reaction to it. Keep up the good work, Hale Worski. Yeah, I'm gonna copy your username here so I remember for future purposes, my friend. So I can watch it after the show. Where is it? There we go. Where was I? LM, $5. Ryan, do you know the Israel role in the development nuclear weapons in South Africa during the apartheid? Doorman, $360, $5. Showing my support for this great stream and hot debate. Disappointed to hear evangelicals support foreign regimes so much. America first. You read that one. Frazier Danger, $2. I'm not gay. To the USS Liberty, please. I really tried, and that really fell flat. I tried my best though, JF. What are you doing in my swamp? $2. Halsey called the Taver an SMG. No, just no. Kane, £5. Ryan shooting civilians. Doesn't matter. Good or bad, it doesn't matter. Might makes right in the end. Those who have the bigger army are always right. Adolf Honkler, I read this one. Thank you so much. Curtis D, $20. I think you read this one, maybe. Liberty is that in America we allow soft tyranny to grab a hold of the tree of liberty, choking her through policies that mock the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, while we the people are made docile by modern comforts. Oh, and Ove Warrior, $5, who's a regular in the Purple Dragon. He's a automated message system that tells us how much mats we have watching. One mat equals 20 viewers. And at this point, we had beep bop bop. You currently have 146.6 mundanes watching. If you want to read on. Matt must hate
All
that.
right. Wake up, my puss morons. $2 US. Ask Ryan about the King David Hotel bombings. LM $5 US. Also, is there okay? This one I asked. CNA Fish. I've asked. Black State $20 US. Thank you for the donation. I asked. Totally not troll. 25 PLN. Lots of new faces here today, and they are all shill. Also, Elliot $5 US. Nice to see the Israeli neocon goblin take his shades off so we can see his shifty eyes during the debate. The Warbucks, $5 US. Good debate. Topic devolved into esotericism, but I enjoyed. The bad virus, £20. All souls are equal and bloodline is meaningless. That statement is meaningless. Black State,
bad
$10
virus.
US. Halsey, you claptrap booger eater. Are you not aware of the Schofield reference Bible when that's all John Agee uses in his Babel sermons? Either you're lying or completely ignorant. Secret Genius, $5 US. Come on, come together on every basis except race, as I forbid that. Yeah, that's an issue I took with Ryan's speech. What are you doing in my swamp? $5 US. Debating the morality of actions is cute. History is determined by will. Red Feather, $2 US. Just wanted to say fuck Blair White. Joshua Larson, $2 US. This is to fund the publication of JF's books only. Thank you. Juvenescence, $2 US. I'll type versus Ryan. Dawson's needs to wake up. Cody Nick, $2 US. A boomer and Lolbertarian, wow, based. Caesar did nothing wrong,
sorry.
$2 US. Ryan Dawson is worse, literally worse. Frazier Danger, it's $10 US. 100% JF is just talking about epigenetics explaining further problems being created by allowing people whom already display bad cultural practices to breed consistently enough to propagate them by gen. LM $5 US. How can you even say that the minorities vote 90 or 75% one way while whites are almost divided evenly?
And you missed a couple just because it scrolled weird. And thematic, $20. Halsey, what do you think of Ryan's theory in War by Deception that 9/11 was an operation carried out by the CIA, Mossad, Saudi, Mukbarat, and Zionist interest groups, PNAC, etc. Very convincing after viewing the GIS 28 pages. Can't believe I read that, by the way. Juvenescence, $5. Andy, what range of IQ makes you prone to avoiding the free market? And what range of the IQ makes you prone to avoiding the free market, single motherhood, crime, and drug use? Soft bigotry of low expectations. And then Halsey's reading a script from Cody Nick. And then Elliot, $5. Ryan, anything but race. Dawson strikes again. And then I think you read this one, the Frazier Danger one. And then you read LM. And now we're at Doorman 360, $20. Would there be room for minorities in an ethno state? I'm a minority with a citizenship in the U.S., and I'm very different from many members who share my ethnicity. Right-leaning USA first libertarian-minded Latinos are rare. I would say like the best state is like the ethno state. That's like how some people perceive it. How I see it is sort of whoever shares a nation's beliefs and principles, right? That's sort of how I personally. Yeah, if you want to be like a nationalist, right? Saying white nationalist, now what if there's like a black dude who's like, no, fuck, like I agree with everything that you're saying. That sort of. Fam, $2 is the losing or not. Kane, £5. There was a kick a ginger day, and there was never a hashtag saying love a ginger day. Cody Nick, $5. People who race mix can't have an honest conversation on race as it directly affects them and their family and would exclude them from the ethno state. Producer Chris, $5. Halsey doesn't know about Diogenes. We need to teach philosophy in schools. Enrique Martinez, $2. Love the streams. Thank you. Kawa, $5. JF, I got my 23andMe results. 4% Ashkenazi, Jew should I end myself?
Well, it's 0.4%. So I would say
0.4, sorry.
every time you have a baby, there's a chance that this particular part will be kicked out, and so don't lose hope.
Oh Jesus! Valentine, $10. Which European country has the lowest IQ? Do you know?
Depends on what you define as Europe, but essentially the further you get from Africa, the higher the IQ. So we have the lowest IQs: Turkey, if you want to count it; Ireland; Greece, if you want to count it; then Romania, and then there's some Russian nations, or Slav nations.
It's just because welfare, JF.
No, it's not welfare. It seems to be
I know.
related to race.
I know. I'm just pulling. I'm pulling Orion.
Then you enter then the next level, which is Spain, France, Denmark, Australia, Germany, and then at the top you have the Asian countries.
Right. Kyler, $2. Me, Andy, the person reading this is bisexual. Okay, read the next one.
All right. Kyler, $2 US. Me, JF Garrier P. The person reading this is bisexual.
3x4. Architecture, $5. Anyone else get booted from the stream at any point? Great show, by the way. Junies. Did I just say something horrible?
Yeah, you said Diogenes, and it was Diogenes.
Okay. Fair enough. Everyone, thank you for watching another Warski Live Friday. David Sherritt and his buddy, can't remember his name, it's some guy, he's not even like a big YouTuber or anything, versus Alternative Hypothesis. And
all right,
who was it? The other guy?
I'll be there.
Oh, dude, that's gonna be good. 7 p.m. Eastern, and then our next show, we're taking a long break for AIU versus Nick Fuentes, and then we'll be shifted into our new schedule. And everyone, tonight, maybe in an hour or two, I'm just gonna go relax, eat some food, and watch some videos and chill out. Purple Dragon, links down there, and we'll see you all on the next video. Peace.
Bye-bye.